Chapter 341. The God of Anxiety is very anxious. Because the ranking battle ended, all players had their level restrictions lifted, and the first thing they did not do was to venture into instances or explore paradise. Instead, they first sought to enhance their own power. Su Qi was no exception. Su Qi stood on a floating boundary, surrounded by the nihility with nothingness around. He stood there. Below his feet was a cliff with no path of retreat. Now, Su Qi was using the Atomic Heart, an item he had acquired free of charge at the auction in Night City, which the young Master Spirit Kings were exceedingly eager to acquire. After all, the sequence path was like crossing the river by feeling the stones. Each sequence, every individual had completely different ascension methods, and Su Qi's sequence had no other template, hence its difficulty was naturally unparalleled. Once successful, however, the ownership was exclusive, and infringement would be prosecuted. Most of the prerequisites for 7th rank have already been completed. Su Qi spoke softly. The prerequisites for 7th rank included reaching level 30. The tasks were 1. Using any means necessary to defeat an existence of a higher sequence than oneself. The progress increased with the difference in sequences. 2. Spending 24 hours in a deadly perilous place. 3. Keeping one's emotions unfluctuating for 24 hours. There were 7 or 8 tasks, big and small. Now that his level restriction was lifted, he could naturally start ascending. He had received many ascension resources containing massive amounts of external spiritual energy from the Bellringer. Let's begin. Su Qi raised his hand. The Atomic Heart was expanding and rotating beneath his feet. It was initially composed of various silver-white metal bars, and now was thunderously moving in all directions. The Atomic Heart was aiding his evolution, finding the most suitable direction. At the same time, Su Qi himself could feel a massive amount of spiritual energy being rapidly consumed. Gosh! At least all the spiritual ability points of sequence 8 per second. All the spiritual points I had previously could only maintain this for 2 minutes. Fortunately, he didn't need to worry, as the Bellringer had provided plenty of resources. At the same time, Su Qi realized, creativity, a single sequence needed a vast amount of resources. He was only just considering ascending to 7th rank, yet the consumption was 100 times, 1,000 times that of others. But at the same time, the benefits would undoubtedly be immense. His current 2 traits, Ancient God's Heart and Spiritual Eyes ability, would advance. The most important thing was that he could also integrate a new ancient relic. At this moment, the chains extended from the Atomic Heart. Like a spider's web, there were thousands of them. The dense chains melded into the endless darkness, exploring evolution for Su Qi. And at this time, here it comes. Suddenly, Su Qi saw one of the silver-white chains of the Atomic Heart trembling. He did not hesitate and directly stepped onto it, beginning to sprint rapidly. After choosing, he needed to react quickly and decisively. Otherwise, he would not reach the 7th rank. Nor could he turn back, easily getting lost and trapped in insurmountable shackles, one of the reasons why many people stay on one sequence for life. However, Su Qi had a backup plan. The question mark, for now, couldn't provide too much information. Here in the sequence space, the spirit acted as the carrier, fictitiously conceiving this place. But Su Qi believed he could leave something behind. Su Qi lightly tapped his finger. A star slowly lit up among the nihility. Unlimited. No consumption. Permanently existent. I didn't expect that I could even light up stars in here. In the process of his rush, countless stars emerged, pushed by him. The originally boundless darkness, nihility, was being crazily illuminated by twinkling stars. Since I've already figured it out, there are no costs, no traces, so it wouldn't hurt to create some stars, even carrying a large amount into the item slot for later use. Just treat it like a special effects skin. Su Qi illuminated his path as he walked. A massive amount of starlight crazily scattered for free. It was merely the ascension of a low sequence, after all. The commotion shouldn't be too significant. But, surprisingly, Su Qi turned it into a dazzling path of starlight. With the large consumption of resources, it didn't take long to see the place indicated by the atomic heart. In the world within nihility, there floated a tombstone, rooted as if within, completely blank without any engraving. But Su Chi knew what he had to do. That was to carve his own sequence name on it. Although putting a name on a tombstone isn't generally a good thing, according to Su Lingqiu, this is what all sequencers must inevitably do. Once sequencers decide to follow a sequence path, they can only proceed along that path. The monuments left by predecessors established a complete sequence path. Those following could go directly according to the guiding tombstone, unlike Su Chi, who still needed to find an unnamed sequence monument. Other sequencers could also obtain traits and new abilities from the tombstone, but Su Chi had to pioneer his own. The Hustlers. Su Chi slowly extended his hand. A carving knife materialized by spiritual power slowly appeared, and engraved these 3 words, stroke by stroke. He felt a moment of clarity in his mind. It seemed as if something broken within his body was being created. And the entire tombstone also trembled. The sequence monument acknowledged his sequence, and it soared into the sky. A multitude of multidimensional runes all manifesting, falling from the sky towards the tombstone. Boom, boom, boom. A massive sound erupted in this realm of nihility. Chapter 342. Voices were flooding Su Chi's mind. Not as if someone was speaking, but more like purer sounds. Akin to the low hum of the universe, the tearing of dimensions. Peculiar aura surged into Su Chi's body. At the same time, congratulations to the player for creating a new sequence node. Currently, Sequence 8. Please be aware. All costs for developing a new sequence path will increase exponentially. Players are reminded to make all necessary preparations. Upon reaching 7th rank, you can create your own totem within the sequence space. Upon reaching Sequence 6, you can upgrade to a shrine. Collect the power of faith. Note: after the creator reaches a certain level in the sequence, other individuals may be initiated into the Hustler's sequence. For each additional Hustler's sequencer, the creator will gain extra evolution and operation. Pop-ups from Paradise appeared at the same time. Su Chi looked at the scene. So it has such an effect. It seems, although many difficulties lie ahead, the future is promising. The nihility around him was swirling. It seemed about time to finish. Su Chi turned back to glance at the dazzling Starlight Avenue, wondering if others would be baffled when they stepped onto it in the future. His figure slowly disappeared from there. Meanwhile, deep within the nihility of the sequence space, countless ancient spiritual temples were slowly floating, each connected to the sequence path, with a continuous flow of strength surging through them. Dusty, silent temples were also slowly awakening. Beings nailed in the darkest parts of the abyss, in the dark place, silently gazed into the distance. Only the old path can be followed, the era of moving forward, cut off by the abyss. For countless years, no one has succeeded in composing a new sequence. Now, someone has succeeded. Regrettably, the being looked into the endless black and white. Is it perhaps too late? And in the present world, at a certain location, a giant mountain-like crystal was being slowly cracked open, surrounded by a group of people half kneeling on the ground, their expressions tense as they watched the entity within the stone. Crack, crack, crack. The giant mountain crystal shattered with a boom, and beneath it the ground split open, revealing figures dressed in ancient garb. Some were no longer breathing, while others were but skin and bones, their soul fires barely smoldering quietly. This scene was also happening elsewhere, on a large scale, small scale, and even welcoming single individuals, but these ancient sleepers, regardless of their strength, were weakly awakening, regaining their powers, and even the ancient new stars that saw no hope or time for their rise in the past were slowly opening their eyes. In any case, these ancient beings, slumbering for countless eons, had partly awoken, desiring to unfurl their ancient radiance once again within the present world. Meanwhile, in a world filled with the despair of pollution. Enormous quantities of pollutants were fearfully avoiding a place, a desolate death island. And on the island stood countless cultists in red robes, each one half kneeling, their faces a mix of piety and madness. What they knelt before was a massive unearthed grave on Death Island. An entity covered in red totems was sitting there, its flesh withered like a mummy, feeble all over, its soul fire flickering shakily. Yet it possessed a terrifying presence that struck fear into the extreme. All the tattoos etched across its body were the totems of the god of anxiety, and its identity was obvious. The bishop of the god of anxiety. It watched icily, deep red pupils focused on the projection appearing before it, observing everything in the anxious land. The turmoil in the anxious land. The terrible presence yearning to break free, suddenly suppressed back down. The emergence of the rainbow bridge. The apparition of a deep red shadow. The roar of the god of anxiety. All these scenes only made its expression more terrifying. Bang! Even after slumbering for countless eons, the force it suddenly unleashed caused the entire island to shake. Don't get excited. Beside it, a black shadow spoke faintly. Why did it fail? Its voice was hoarse, as if surging up from the nine netherworld. I don't know. The black shadow replied slowly and calmly. According to the original plan, the ritual that was laid out over decades, the destruction of a large number of worlds, the gathered power of despair should have been enough to erode and loosen the anxious land, to free your god from his entrapment, but something unknown happened inside. From their skin, it was apparent that they did not worship the same deity. Yet both came from the abyss, thus they shared a common origin. Now it seems our plan has failed. The deep red bishop's veins bulged, staring intently at the figure with outstretched arms in the light and shadow display, his expression one of shock and suspicion. Who is he? Why is there? He looked at the abundant black fog on Su Buxian's body. An audience seeker of Sequence 9 named Su Buxian. The black shadow also turned its gaze to the display. I too was shocked by the abyssal aura on him, but it must be an illusion. He seems to have found something valuable in the treasury of the god's palace in the anxious land, and he must have also made contact with the god of anxiety. We must find him. The deep red bishop's voice was hoarse, the recovered strength sufficient to speak in a chilling tone. Of course, but he is from paradise, a very special place as you know. We can't find him, the black shadow spoke softly. But he will show up eventually. They were even more eager to find Su Buxian than the many forces of the present world. Let's go. I need to recover my strength first. The deep red bishop stood up. The great lord of anxiety will surely return in the not-so-distant future. The black shadow too slowly calmly gazed into the black fog in the sky dome. No one can resist the steps of the abyss, the recovery, and at this very moment, the hollow eye of the evil god, watching from beneath the abyss, gazed upon the endless black fog. A massive surge of pollutants was violently throbbing, battering at the seal of the abyss. The slight leakage of pollution, it was like a plague eroding the present world. It aimed to break the seal of the abyss once again, to stir up despair anew. At the same time, it was also searching for someone, to use the most desperate, most horrific methods to make them eternally struggle in agony. And in the deepest part of the anxious land, the god of anxiety, its massive body was firmly pressed into a coffin, its limbs cruelly pinned down by nails of divine blood. Couldn't move its limbs, but its face was covered in veins throbbing with furious terror. Boom! It was roaring. It was struggling furiously, trying to burst forth with everything. But still, it couldn't stop a mosquito in the darkness with a buzz-buzz stereo sound, landing beside its ear and lingering. The only time there was no buzzing sound was when it came to suck blood, and afterward, it would hover around the ear again, seemingly digesting. In the hospital, the bell ringer and Dolly silently watched the monitors. It's causing an uproar again. How many times has it been? About the 30th time. They could still hear the roars of the god of anxiety. the vibrations shaking the entire anxious land, causing thunderous phenomena across the heavens and earth. The bell ringer didn't understand. I've checked the ritual. It's nearly impossible for it to come out now. Why make these futile outbursts? Dolly shook its head too. Not sure. Maybe it's resentful about the last time, but the terrible anger is a bit frightening. The bell ringer spoke gently. It's okay. I expect it will calm down soon. Although the god of anxiety spread unease and despair, this deity's emotions were actually very stable, or rather callous. Torturing and killing others, there wasn't a single fluctuation of emotion. Is that so? Dolly silently watched the roiling blood sea, feeling like these days would continue for a long time. Inside Paradise, the many players who were breaking through their own limits suddenly saw new information appear before them. Attention all server players. The new expansion pack for Paradise has been updated. A grand era is awakening, with various forces in the present world ready to welcome those from the past. All players who have stepped into Paradise will face more dangerous instances and will form a closer connection with the present world. And now, the system will issue the main quest of Paradise. Chapter 343. Entering the new instance. Paradise Main Quest. Current phase. Approach of the Black Shadow. Attention to all players participating in the open beta. From now on, every instance you experience may encounter power from the abyss. Successful handling will grant extra rewards and progress. Precautions. 1. Confronting the power of the abyss is extremely dangerous. Please consider carefully. 2. The main quest of the current world will persist until the pollution value reaches 1000. 3. Once the pollution value hits 1000, a major event in the current version will occur. Please try to slow down the increase of the pollution value. Oldemo. Suchi spoke softly. So, what is this pollution value? At this moment, Suchi was sitting next to a restaurant. Zone 9. Subarea number 5. Overseen by the Empty Blade Club. Under each core hub, there are more than 20 areas guarded and developed by top clubs as shelters. A burly man next to him, with a stern face, sipped his drink gently. Don't sound so familiar. We've only known each other for less than 2 hours. He was also being petty today. As an old-timer in Paradise, knowing that today's open beta would bring in a massive influx of new players entering Paradise, ready to sell some of his useless stuff for a high price to these newcomers. After all, newcomers, just like freshmen in college, new interns, and novices in games, they are the best to squeeze for profit. They tend to be new to the world, lacking social experience, thin-skinned, and under the pressure of veterans in Paradise, they always end up being led by the nose and then suffer losses but are powerless to change that. So, he had set his sights on Suchi, who appeared in this city. Since players entering Paradise for the open beta all have anonymous protection, currently a free service offered by Paradise, but after a certain time, it needs to be purchased with spirit coins. From the moment he saw Suchi, glancing around curiously at everything, his curiosity was evident. So, he targeted him. The two of them struck up a conversation, originally planning to peddle his useless junk for a high price in spirit coins. But, somehow, not a single item sold, and he was bombarded with questions by this guy, now sitting in a bar in this leisure area. The kicker was, the drinks were even on him. Oldemo guzzled down his drink, now somewhat regretful of picking what seemed like a naive newbie but turned out to be a quite savvy fellow. That pollution value is a scale that records the erosion of abyss power. The higher its value, the greater the level of pollution, indicating greater dangers that are about to occur. Suchi responded, I see. What's the pollution value right now? Oldemo gently opened a pop-up, displaying a funnel-like hourglass with a bit of black fog slowly descending, while the bottom looked like a thick black lake. Above it flashed dark numbers. 156. Suchi paused. That number doesn't seem very high. Oldemo shook his head, his voice grave. It wasn't like this before. The pollution value, was once as high as 700 before the Rainbow Bridge incident, but for some reason it suddenly dropped. A lot of us speculated if something happened in the anxious land, but it's a good thing overall. Su Qi remained silent. He probably knew what happened. It must have been his resuppression of the god of anxiety that caused the previously high pollution value to plummet like a cliff. The stockholders of Paradise should be relieved, but those from the Abyss camp might be freaking out. Let me check. Su Qi, following Old Mo's method, found the window to check the pollution value, which even required spending 1,000 spirit coins. Typical of Paradise, always scamming players for resources. However, he opened it and saw the number had changed to 160. It increased again? That fast? Su Qi was somewhat surprised. Old Mo said solemnly, "It's always fluctuating. Various erosions occurring in the present world affect its change, and players clearing instances can also solve some parts, pulling the pollution value back and forth. You see, it decreased again. Now it had changed to 157. It seemed that inside an instance, some players had resolved part of the pollution, or maybe someone in the present world was making efforts. In any case, it fluctuated, but according to information from Paradise, as long as it doesn't exceed 1,000 points, there wouldn't be much of a problem." And seeing how well Old Mo knew about the pollution value, Su Qi roughly understood that this pollution value had been around for a long time and was a very important indicator. He didn't know if there had ever been cases of exceeding the limit, and what would happen after reaching 1,000 wasn't asked, considering they had only known each other for 2 hours. Despite being conversed into familiarity, and even actively coerced into treating him, he probably wouldn't get the answer he wanted on such an important issue. But no matter. It would be the same asking Su Linxiu later. "So, are you interested in those tools I mentioned just now?" Old Mo finally asked again. "These items are essential for my journey so far, now selling at a loss, each for only 1,000 spirit coins." Chapter 344. Entering the new instance. Su Qi glanced at the items listed in the window that popped up. Potions, resistance bracelets, some shiny but not very useful materials, about 1,000 in a bundle would be a fair deal. "Brother Mo, when I said let's sit down for a drink and chat at leisure, I naturally meant that I've always been quite interested in your items, but..." Su Qi sighed softly. "I only have about 100 spirit coins now." Brother Mo's eyes widened. "Didn't you participate in the ranking battles? How come you only have this few spirit coins?" One of the reasons everyone was eyeing the newbie was because after the ranking battles ended, the various rewards tempted the newcomers into reckless spending, while also fattening their purses. Su Qi shrugged. "I'm just a minor character, an ordinary player. At most I get a participation award. I've already spent those resources on breaking through the sequence, and now I'm penniless and resourceless." Brother Mo cursed. "Then why the hell were you so interested in chatting with me all this way? I thought 100 spirit coins could cover it." Are newcomers so naive? Moreover, Su Qi declared emphatically, "Aren't we having such a pleasant chat because of friendship, Brother Mo? If not for the rules of Paradise that held him back, he would really like to give this newcomer a little shock from a senior." Sigh. Brother Mo sighed softly, despondently drinking his alcohol. The other party had indeed chatted with him all the way over for the past 2 hours, and he himself was actually an honest man. He wanted to scam the newcomers like others, but seems his skills were still not up to snuff. No, that's not it. It was the other party who was too extraordinary. Now, it was he himself that somewhat couldn't save face. Let it be. After all, the newbies didn't have much money, and this guy looked even more like a poverty-stricken player with only 100 spirit coins. New players lack strength and background, otherwise they wouldn't come to him with various questions. Those super newcomers from the big clubs wouldn't be wandering around the different areas, but would be improving their strength and entering instances. It's just his warm heart at work. "Kid, is there anything else you want to ask? But it's not free. Although you can't buy much with 100 spirit coins, you can at least buy me another drink," said Brother Mo, looking at Su Qi, who, although an ordinary player, was actually quite clever. Of course, Spending all my fortune to buy Brother Mo a drink is the least I can do. Brother Mo muttered, "The way you say it, I feel like a bad guy." However, even if his words are rough, the logic is right. Although the kid didn't buy anything, it's just because he was really broke, and indeed used his last 100 spirit coins to buy him a drink. Su Chi took out 100 spirit coins from his several millions of spirit coins and bought Brother Mo a drink. "Don't worry, as long as you keep running instances, you'll eventually save up spirit coins. Besides, be mindful of others and don't get scammed," advised Brother Mo, his attitude changing. No longer aiming to scam the guy but instead giving tips and sharing experiences. "I'll be careful." Su Chi's spirit coins were accumulated from Night City to the end of the ranking battles. Spirit coins were indeed important, being the currency in circulation across the 10,000 realms in the present world, and they contained energy that could be used in many ways. They could also be used to purchase a lot of Ascension resources. He had already understood that his path on Sequence 1 would be extremely difficult, requiring huge consumption and inevitably a large amount of spirit coins and resources. But no big deal. His few tens of millions were just a drop in the bucket. The true foundation was still with the Hustler's Chamber of Commerce. He wondered how it had developed now. With the protection of the Nxingha title and the Spirit King, it should not be affected too much. Just then, the noisy voices suddenly came from outside the bar. A group of people were entering the area, looking for other newcomers. "Are they looking for newcomers to form a team?" Su Chi squinted, recognizing the intention. Brother Mo looked towards the street outside the bar, enjoying his free drink, finding it somewhat comforting. Normal. Players who just entered Paradise might have gone through some instances, but still don't understand the mechanism of Paradise, and he glanced outside at the black and white scenery beyond the sky dome. "And what? Old days?" Brother Mo shook his head. "Forget it. These things are too far away for an ordinary player like you. There's no need to understand them right now." "All right." Su Chi didn't lack understanding. He knew all there was to know already. Anyway, he looked towards the others. Many in Paradise aren't good people, and their purpose isn't just to scam newcomers, but also to take others' possessions. Watch out for players from Free City. Be careful. I get it. Not everyone can be as amiable as Brother Mo. Brother Mo's face turned red, a sense of embarrassment rising. He coughed and looked at the seemingly harmless fellow in front of him. "One more thing. Lately many people in Paradise are inquiring about a guy named Su Buxian. If you want to earn spirit coins, you might consider looking into it. A lot of top clubs are offering high prices for his whereabouts." Su Chi's eyelids twitched. Then he relaxed. After all, the top clubs and various forces of the present world cooperated. And although they couldn't come into Paradise, the moment he ran an instance and if a trace of him leaked, it would surely attract numerous forces to travel distances to the instance world he was in. "I heard about that too," said Su Chi, contemplating. "But this guy is so high profile right now. Surely he'll be well protected." Chapter 345. Entering the new instance. Old Mo shrugged his shoulders. "Who knows? Many people think that Su Buxian is just lucky, and everyone has looked into him thoroughly, no connections, no power. Even if he had something precious in his hands, it wouldn't last long." He whispered softly, "Anyway, as far as I know, quite a few forces in the present world seem to be in touch with people from Free City. Exactly what deals have been made is unclear, but that kid, he's in danger." He wasn't interested in the guy, nor did he want to waste time tracking him down. "All right then." Old Mo downed the wine in his cup. "I've got to go to an instance soon, and you should head to one too. The current stage is still quite special and important for you after all. Soon there will be player combat, club battles, and other new content." Old Mo waved his hand, not bothering to add Su Chi as a friend either. Both were in anonymous state, IDs hidden, and their facial features altered by illusion. The man called himself Old Mo, and Su Chi called himself Patian Knight Moon Xian Yuan Sword Soul Unrivaled Emperor. Anyway, he didn't remember, nor did he want to, such a ridiculous, over-the-top name. Su Chi watched the direction in which Old Mo left, quietly sipping the drink in front of him. The other was heading toward the monochrome land of old days. It seemed that was their way to enter an instance, completely different from the stage of the new players, who still had to enter their personal spaces to be matched. There are more people interested in me than I thought. It's about time to enter an instance. I must improve my strength quickly to find that sealed land. Su Chi handed spirit coins to the barkeep. The bartender, as well as the various characters walking in the streets of this district, were actually NPCs conjured by Paradise, as vividly lifelike as those on the last level of Anxious Land. Of course, everything under the influence of Paradise required spirit coins to use, most of them expensive to the point of being luxurious. Even staying in any area of Paradise for over an hour required payment in spirit coins. But still, many were willing to bear the cost because here one could relax, recuperate, trade, and so on. And so, it's understandable that the cut is so steep. Su Chi observed the flow of spirit coins, leading toward the core hub of Zone 9. Everything was for the purpose of maintaining operations, resisting erosion. Su Chi left the bar, sidestepping all the seniors who came up to chat, and chose a door at random on the street. Once open again, it was his own personal space. Stepping inside. You have left Zone 9, Area No. 5, returning to personal space. Beginning solo matchmaking. Please note, Paradise instance is descending. Upon the end of the instance, based on player performance, traces will be illuminated, which can greatly advantage the player in future explorations of the land of old days. Current instance difficulty. Hard, and darkness swooped down on Su Chi quickly. But of course, the stars filling the room were still shining their eternal light for free. Soon, Su Chi's consciousness began to drift downwards. Amid a vague and swirling transition, his body started to assume a meditative posture, his 5 senses gradually returning. And without even opening his eyes, a melodious violin sound echoed in his ears, surrounded by what seemed to be many people singing. The warm voices, brimming with vitality, touched Su Chi's ears like spring breeze caressing his face. Everyone's spirits were high, filled with a newborn hope. Once, I wandered aimlessly on the dark night's road. The breeze pierced my soul, unable to find the direction I should take. Chapter 346. The newly created person. Life's journey, he thought. How many tears must it take to complete? Can I look forward to the far horizon? Together we fly, the newly created. The melodious singing gently coaxed Su Chi's eyes open. Sunlight warmly scattered across the ground, inside the church's bright space, where over 100 people sat cross-legged, dressed in pure white garments, barefoot, sitting on the floor. Their bodies swayed with the rhythm of the song, their expressions dazed, contentedly rocking. And standing at the center was a lady playing the violin, on her tiptoes, with a faint smile on her face, leading everyone in singing the catchy tune. At this moment Su Chi too wore white clothing. He raised an eyebrow slightly, feeling something strange throughout his body. He slowly reached out his hand, pulling open the garment over his chest. There was a distinct black stripe on his chest. It radiated from the center of his chest, spreading outward, with clear black veins pulsing. Su Chi paused momentarily, for the singing had suddenly stopped, and as he slowly lifted his head, the 100-odd people around him all turned their gaze towards him. Or, more precisely, towards the black stripe on Su Chi's chest. Their looks were calm, an alien feeling transmitted through them. Your gazes are a bit too intense, Su Chi commented, noting that at least 70 of the 100 believers were male, though there were also old folks and children mixed in. There's something wrong with your body. An elderly man slowly raised his finger, pointing at Su Chi, his face mystical, his withered mouth moving. That black stripe is a terrible sickness. A middle-aged woman also spoke softly, her figure plump, her expression serene. People who get sick? A little boy next to her tilted his head. Die. It was broad daylight, a brightly lit church, their eyes fixated on Su Chi in the silent space. Yet an involuntary chill arose. Facing so many stares, Su Chi, however, did not panic. Looking at the black stripe on his chest, He indeed felt an evil aura emanating from it. Seems like a serious illness indeed. He earnestly addressed the crowd. Is it too late to take some digestive tablets now? No medicine will work. We all suffer from the same fatal illness. The woman with the violin turned around and slowly untied her clothing at the back. There were large patches of black spots, like poisonous insects rooted in her veins, seemingly integrated with her flesh and blood. At the same time, the rest of the people also began revealing parts of their bodies covered with black stripes. All right, that guy doesn't need to remove his pants. That's a bit too much black, Su Chi remarked lightly. So now I see, we've all gathered here because of the same terminal illness. No. The woman before him, however, shook her head. Everyone who comes to this world is stained with such a cruel illness. We are all people on the brink of death. Su Chi's brow twitched slightly. Everyone who comes to this world? He did not inquire further. But you needn't worry, she revealed a smile. There is a way to resolve all of this, as long as you follow the Venerable's instructions. At that moment, everyone stood up, each clad in white, with heads bowed and a sincere smile. Su Chi also slowly rose to his feet. He wasn't too fond of this white attire, but for the moment he apparently couldn't use his liquid metal, though he felt no other limitations. What follows is to go with them to the place of baptism. The woman smiled gently, her violin strings gently vibrating again, and the beautiful melody resumed. Su Chi gave her violin a glance, then returned his gaze. Stepping out from the church's main door, the middle-aged man patted Su Chi's shoulder. Don't worry, as long as you follow the instructions properly, you will survive and soon, you'll find life here to be very happy. How happy? The middle-aged man paused. You'll experience a sense of complete peace, something you couldn't feel in the outside world amidst the strife and conflict. Su Chi walked outside. There, too, were many people in white, their faces beaming with joy, walking together on the street, clean and warm. This was just another town. The Sky Dome was no different from other worlds. By the way, what did you mean by everyone who comes to this world earlier? Su Chi inquired lightly. The middle-aged man slowly looked at Su Chi. Every 3 months, due to the arrival of the baptism day in our world, many sinful people fall from the 10,000 realms, entering here. Sinful people? Yes, many here carry extremely heavy sins. Upon arriving in this world, the illness of sin appears like a burrowing worm, emerging to reveal each person's terminal illness. Su Chi waved his hand dismissively. Don't talk nonsense. I'm a good person. You can deceive others, but not your own heart. The middle-aged man pointed at Su Chi's chest. We are all deeply sinful, and only through baptism, only through the Venerable, can we cleanse our sins. Speaking this line, especially when mentioning the Venerable, the man's hands came together involuntarily, and he even bowed deeply with devotion. Su Chi narrowed his eyes. He had seen scenes like this before, all cultists. The people continued walking, chatting and laughing along the way, despite the lack of substance in their conversations, all about where to pick flowers today, what to refurbish, and how long to pray to the Venerable. Chapter 347. Su Chi looked at the people around him. Although everyone appeared to be ordinary, in reality, each person was a sequencer, with the majority possessing the power of the 9th rank, and some even of the 7th rank, with abnormalities, oddities, and human-like beings amongst them. Some people also seemed to, as the middle-aged man had said, bear past sins. Su Chi could see numbers of killings and acts of cruelty mixed within their information. All villains? Then collectively seeking redemption? Am I also counted among them? What a joke. I am very much a good person. Su Chi looked at the middle-aged man. How long have you been here? 3 months? The middle-aged man slowly released his hands and smiled gently. In these 3 months, I have forgotten all the anxieties and troubles of the past. No longer the executioner with countless murders to his name. Under the guidance of the Venerable, he looked fixedly at Su Chi, his smile somehow enigmatic. I became a new creation. The 100 people present seemed to be a fixed team. Su Chi also learned from the middle-aged man that the majority of the team before him had arrived here 3 months ago, now thoroughly familiar with everything, and like the middle-aged man, possessed a serene temperament instilled by education and a strong sense of belonging to the venerable and everything here. At the same time, there were also 3 people who had only recently entered this place. There was someone who had been here for a week, smiling as if blessed by a gentle spring breeze, seemingly no different from the others. There was someone who had been here for 5 days, whose smile, though slightly stiff, was in cheerful harmony with the others, laughing along. Everyone displayed an air of happiness, joy, and contentment. And then there was one who had only been there for a day. He was a young man with a reluctant smile on his face, pale and insubstantial upon closer inspection, frail in stature, seemingly out of place among the others. Yet he occasionally looked at his collarbone, where black stripes were also present, his expression hesitant. Su Chi followed the crowd, walking slowly along the street. This place was naturally full of weirdness, and every person they saw was rather strange. On the one hand friendly, warm, brimming with happiness and hope. On the other hand, they also made one feel uncomfortable. Moreover, there was he who all of them mentioned and in whom they had immense faith, the Venerable. Who might that be? All before him seemed to indicate that only at the time of the baptism might new clues emerge. We're here. The leader of the group looked ahead at a White House. As everyone looked up, this is the place for the baptism. Their expressions turned excited. Newborns, cast aside all demonic obstructions of the past. Please recite the teachings of the Venerable in your hearts. Enter with the most devout spirit. The person standing at the entrance of the White House spoke softly. Thank you, Venerable. Thank you for everything here. They clasped their hands together, their voices filled with devotion. Then the door opened, but the inside wasn't very bright. Everyone proceeded to walk in an orderly fashion. You too? The guard looked at the young man and Su Chi. Wait, do we need to register? Su Chi paused. The last digits of my phone number are. No need. He spoke softly. Since this is your first time attending the baptism, please write down your names here. Su Chi paused, glancing at the young man. If the baptism seems to be held daily, how come it's your first time too? The young man's body shook slightly. The person calmly said, he violated the baptismal guidance at the last moment yesterday. But by grace of the Venerable, who is kind and values life, this is his last chance. The young man's trembling hand wrote down his name. Yi Yuzi. Su Chi also picked up the pen. Wait a moment for me. He too wrote down his name. The pitch-black, indifferent, invincible, blood-stained angel. The mighty blue cat commander of the Forbidden Army. The person looked at the long string of names. His eyelids twitched violently. His lips moved slightly, but he did not speak, until Su Chi finished. Then the person calmly said, Go in. The youth stared at Su Chi somewhat blankly. Your name is so long. Su Chi gave him a strange look. Young man, you're not actually writing your real name, are you? The youth was taken aback. Otherwise? What if I lied and that person saw through it? Su Chi could only say that this youth indeed had the clear stupidity of a college student. Any name will do. Most people who come to this world are not good people. If it's their first time participating in the baptism ritual, they usually hide their identities and write a fake name. That person obviously doesn't care, having grown accustomed to it. Writing the name seems more like a formality. Is that so? The youth seemed to realize something. After entering the White House, the space inside was larger than imagined, and moreover, it was dark and windless. Walking along the only corridor, they were gradually descending. The warmth around them slowly disappeared, replaced by a chill that caressed the hairs on their skin. All right, Yuzi, please answer a few questions for me during this short journey. Su Chi said softly, not giving him a chance to refuse. How exactly did you get here? And according to the middle-aged man's theory, you must have committed some sins. The youth opened his mouth, stammering, I killed. Over 100 of my people. Su Chi's eyes moved slightly as he glanced at the youth. Well, this young man was certainly interesting. Then, in the process of fleeing, I was suddenly caught up in a chaotic current, and then I ended up here. Su Chi nodded. I see. The youth curiously looked at Su Chi. Brother, what about you? He also knew that almost everyone here was a villain, so this slightly older young man in front of him surely had an unspeakable past. Su Chi paused. My tale is complicated. I've offed some people, made a lot of enemies, and been hunted down for various insignificant matters. In short, I'm a good man. The youth. Su Chi did not doubt whether anyone here recognized him. He had the protection of anonymity in paradise. After entering the instance, he naturally lost his concealment. Now he was his own image, but it seemed that this world was rather closed off with blocked information. The youth was even more so on the run, with no time to learn any information, and the vastness of the present world. The massive amount of information was as abundant as the Milky Way, making it difficult to spread to every corner. Su Chi's footsteps slowly tapped on the stairs. They were now descending one step at a time, and the only light around was from the dim yellow lamps. So deep for a so-called baptism? Baptism? The youth uttered the word baptism, his body trembling slightly, and his mood somewhat somber. What's the matter? Everyone else goes in smiling. Why do you have a troubled look? Su Chi said gently. The youth muttered. The people of this world, they healed my wounds, gave me clothes, food, and cared for me like family, allowing me to forget my past pain and obtain an unprecedented tranquility and serenity. A warm touch of emotion surfaced on his face. But the youth's expression sighed lightly. I just can't accept this baptism. Why? Su Chi looked toward the slightly lit exit ahead. They didn't know how far down they had descended, but in addition to the chilly air, he faintly smelled a whiff of decay. The youth looked towards the corridor's exit, his footsteps growing heavy. Because it's nothing like the baptism you're imagining. The two of them stepped out. In this underground space, Su Chi saw a multitude of cruel torture devices and the hammer symbolizing judgment hanging from the dome, with the surrounding crowd wearing strange smiles, standing in a circle. The youth clenched his fists, his voice low. You see, I told you it's different. But Su Chi also smiled. No, it's exactly as I imagined. Chapter 348. I am guilty of a terrible sin. In the dim space, amongst the stench of rot and disinfectant, there was also a thick scent of blood. Clearly, this place had long existed. An old man in a white robe stood with his arms outstretched. Venerable, the great Venerable is guiding us all. We who are deeply sinful. Every one of us bears an endless burden of evil consequences. Rather than say that all the pain originates from the black lines on our bodies, it's that we have not let everything go. His voice echoed through the space, almost like a holy sound around the ear. The congregation appeared devout, looking up with serene smiles, hands clasped together as if listening to scripture. The old man looked on with satisfaction at those present. Most had arrived about 3 months earlier and had now become newly reborn. His gaze also fell on Su Chi and the young boy. Do not be frightened by everything here. The so-called instruments of torture are but to suppress your past sins. Only in this way can you be baptized and be reborn. His voice was hoarse, yet filled with emotion, the abrasive tone gently spreading. All of you hold hope, the hope of new lives ready for change. And now is the time to cleanse oneself of all sin. The old man's words had just finished. Boom! The heavy hammers on the dome struck the heavy bell. The violent vibration burst into everyone's ears, drilling into their brains. A trace of madness appeared in their eyes. The bell, echoing, shattering, as if 10 concert-grade speakers surrounded Su Chi, the air itself violently trembling. The young boy gave a slight start, his expression initially uneasy and tense but now under the bell's resonance. He slowly found a different kind of tranquility and involuntary serenity. He even shook as he raised his hands, clasping them together under the incessant tolling of the bell. It seems to be psychological influence. Su Chi also slowly brought his hands together. After all, the old man, though spreading his arms wide, was watching them with a faint, almost imperceptible focus. He himself would not be influenced. His right eye, the spiritual eyes, was not for show. Su Chi was unaffected. Nor was he like the young boy, now mumbling and following the old man in chanting the word venerable. At that moment, Su Chi also saw the actions of the others. Everyone gently pulled back their clothing, revealing areas where the black lines spread, and with each inch, under the intense bell tones and the old man's chanting of the venerable's name, the black lines seemed to come alive. They emitted a strong evil aura. Anger, restlessness, murderous intent, all bursting forth in a torrent. Su Chi also looked towards his own chest. The black lines on his chest were also bursting and spreading. The middle-aged man had mentioned earlier that these black lines could cause unbearable pain, like a small knife scraping against your flesh and bones. Everyone feared these black lines, and only the daily baptism could alleviate the pain. But only Su Chi could see the true face of these black lines. He now did not move to debunk them but complied with his hands clasped, his face bearing a harmless smile towards the old man, as if he too had fallen into tranquility. The old man calmly observed him and the young boy before slowly retracting his gaze. Now, the baptism begins. Bang! The surrounding walls suddenly lowered, revealing a series of prison-like enclosed spaces. Inside were creatures wholly black, covered in black like mummified monsters. Densely packed. Astonishing. Su Chi schemes through the sight. These mummy-like monsters, perhaps numbered in the thousands. They wriggled like insects. Their bodies reeked of a disgusting scent and radiated endless evil. These are the forms of sin, the old man began softly. Now, the old man continued in a gentle, soothing tone. Eliminate the evil consequences, punish the sin, cleanse oneself. Let your sins disappear with their utmost pain, and have all your evil consequences meticulously removed from within. And in this gloomy space with hundreds of people, apart from Su Chi, nearly everyone was sporting a smile, as if they were truly listening devoutly to these words. What can I say? Su Chi found it hard to judge. This rhetoric was full of holes, even worse than the pyramid schemes he had once busted. However, Su Chi could understand. The world here was full of insidious influences, psychological impacts, from the worship that began in the church, the peace and pleasantness of the violin, the warmth and cordial encounters along the way, plus this thing on the chest, like boiling a frog in warm water. Various uneasy emotions would be plucked out bit by bit, leaving only warmth and calm in the heart. The cages had not yet opened, and everyone was showing excited, bloodshot eyes, their hands eager to do something. This was their baptism. Once it was all done, their pain would subside, their hearts would gain greater peace, and they'd feel true happiness. The dungeon slowly opened. The crowd rushed in impatiently. Even the young boy bit his lip, and after some struggle began to move. Yesterday he could still reject all this, but today he had already fallen into it. Everything in this world was like boiling a frog in warm water. No matter who entered this world, in the end, they would all, uniformly dressed in white, uniformly showing smiling faces, devoutly chanting the name of the Venerable. Chapter 349. I am laden with heavy sins. Su Chi slowly placed his hands on the shoulders of the youth. The boy's body trembled slightly, but he did not respond. The strength in his footsteps remained strong as he looked at Su Chi with eyes slightly bloodshot. Don't hold me back. Su Chi said, I'm not holding you back, just asking how you're feeling now. Are you still holding on to Brother Ma's great idea of dialectical materialism? The youth remained silent. He didn't understand but began to lick his lips. His withered lips were devoid of color, and his face grew even paler. I am in a lot of pain now. Black patterns spread across his body, seemingly burning, not particularly painful, but every inch of his flesh could feel a searing sense of pain, as if it had even penetrated his heart. Intense anxiety made him feel as though he was engulfed in confusion and vague emotions, with a suffocating sense of being overwhelmed. I hear voices rising within my heart. As long as I join them, as long as I can kill those sinners, as long as I live in this world, I will find relief. The murmuring of the boy made Su Chi understand that this guy had also stepped halfway in. Unlike the other evildoers here, they engaged in these acts, which would stimulate the evil within, feeling refreshing and comfortable. They were not good people to begin with. Being here was just a form of venting for them. You too? Why are you not moving? The old man's voice suddenly appeared behind Su Chi and the youth, ghost-like. The youth was startled, feeling a chill and dread all over. Su Chi, however, did not move, nor did he turn around, but rather looked at the judgment hammer in the dome. Because as a newcomer I was thinking, everyone is praising the Venerable, but so far, I haven't even seen the Venerable's face. Are you a newcomer here for baptism? The old man gently revealed a smile which was very warm. Sorry, there is no chance to see the Venerable right now. Su Chi looked at the old man and smiled faintly. I see. Then how can I meet the Venerable? The old man's gaze fixed on Su Chi. In 3 days, the great Venerable will be in the largest church, conducting a sermon for the heart for everyone. He put his hands together. Thank you, Venerable. Ahead, people were slicing the black mummies, one cut after another. The black liquid spurting out from within had soaked their clothes and splashed onto their cheeks, yet seemingly without any awareness. As for the black mummies, they looked alive from the outside, but once pierced, they were just shells. What was inside? In the midst of painful screams, shrieks, and the despairing growls, it was all slowly fading away. Only Su Chi noticed something from inside these black mummy shells was being sucked into the bodies of the people. Ah! Everyone gently closed their eyes, hands pressed together, emitting a contented murmur. The various black patterns on their bodies were also receding like the tides, as if they had indeed been washed away by a baptism. Do you see it? The old man gently spoke in a warm voice. I know the concerns of you too. The process and place of baptism may seem frightening, but in reality, they are all just ways to weigh down the sins here. By leaving everything behind in this place, one finds liberation and a happier life. If you still have concerns, I can give you time to think, but your illness? The old man sighed lightly, earnestly saying, really shouldn't be delayed. The boy's lips quivered. Suddenly, he spat out a mouthful of black blood, collapsing to his knees, trembling. His face paler than ever and completely devoid of color. The old man's eyes moved, gently saying, he is having an outbreak. All eyes shifted in unison, and then everyone put down everything in their hands and gathered around. One by one, dressed in blood-stained white clothes, they chattered non-stop, the noise and discussion echoing around. His illness has gotten worse. Yesterday's hesitation and retreat have let the pain devour him. He does not believe in the Venerable. He is going to die. Baptism. He must undergo baptism. The youth was in excruciating pain. The black lines seemed as if they were trying to devour him, something that couldn't be endured simply by gritting one's teeth. His mind was somewhat dazed under the surging of the black lines. He muttered to himself and slowly reached out his hand. I need baptism. Child, don't worry. The old man also slowly extended his hand, the people around them forming a circle with smiles on their faces. The warmth in their eyes and the gentleness of their tone contrasted sharply with the various bloodstains on their bodies. We will lead you out of hell. But the youth's defenses had collapsed in his dazed and pained state, his hand about to grasp the old man's palm. Yet, it was Su Chi who directly caught the old man's hand instead. Elder, Su Chi shook the other's hand enthusiastically, his face wearing a warm smile. The words you just spoke were really touching. One should indeed let go of all the past in life. Let me go first, he seems to be all right. The youth spat out another mouthful of blood. The people, which of your eyes sees him as all right? Moreover, Su Chi slowly revealed another line on his arm, as if engraved into his flesh. My sins are heavier. I am in greater need of redemption. As the tattoo appeared, the old man's pupils slightly constricted, as if he sensed an overwhelming murderous aura, as if he has killed countless people. A coldness that regarded human life as insignificant. Endless sins seemed to be hidden inside this young man's body. His first reaction was not of surprise, but of immense joy, and he concealed it extremely well. You can? The old man instantly gave up on the youth, even showing a more passionate smile. You come for the baptism. Good. Su Chi slowly rolled down his sleeve and followed the old man, wearing a full smile towards the inside. Although the blood rage curse had been triggered once, it didn't mean that it would disappear because of that. The god of anxiety harbored a deep loathing for him. The curse would persist like a burr in the flesh, unless the other party actively removed it or he found a way to deal with it. And currently, the blood fury value had not been reset. Current blood fury value 221-3149. Once it reaches 10 million, the god of anxiety will descend again. This shows just how deeply the god of anxiety loves him. And the power that would appear next time was likely to be even more terrifying. Su Chi slowly followed the old man towards the center of the area. He looked at the question mark above the old man's head. It showed. He is incredibly excited, shocked that your sins are so horrendous. He has never seen such a wicked person, and wants to bring you down before the venerable returns. What heinous sins? It's just irrelevant to me, Su Chi said calmly, looking at the old man who was trembling slightly, fiercely suppressing both shock and joy. The source of the sins was the curse of the god of anxiety. Even a hint of its aura was enough to be overwhelmingly sinful. Although everyone here was evil, the sins of all of them combined, even if multiplied by 1,000, wouldn't match a single hair of the sinful aura attached to this curse. Moreover, sins seemed to be an important thing. The venerable and his followers seemed to really like wicked people. I wonder what their faces would look like if all the sins on the curse of the god of anxiety burst forth. However, Su Chi wasn't in a hurry. He had begun to understand the strangeness of this place, and those black mummies, referred to as baptisms, were the key to everything. The venerable hadn't yet returned or made an appearance. The old man took Su Chi to the side of a cage and personally brought out the black mummy, its evil aura filled with struggle and madness, and also various torments and murderous intents. Now, the old man handed a knife to Su Chi. You may begin your baptism. No need, elder. Su Chi didn't take it, but instead slowly drew out the dark star, which morphed into the shape of a knife. I prefer to use my own blade. Chapter 350, The Great Venerable. Su Chi had already made his way to the side of the black mummy, his gaze sweeping around. If the blackness on everyone's body were patterns, then on this mummy it seemed like living liquid. He looked confused. There had always been only one piece of information: parasitic poison liquid sealed by human skin. The densely packed black mummies locked in the dungeon were not living people. They were human shapes stitched together from human skins. And the purpose of these human skins was to seal all this black liquid inside them. Everyone, what you call undergoing baptism is nothing but gradually transferring this parasitic poison liquid into your own body. This thing is very strange and bizarre. It's my first time seeing it. The most important thing is, Su Chi stood in front of the old man's enthusiastic eyes and slowly raised his own dagger. His weapon, known as Dark Star, which he named Death Star Annihilation, was sending him a craving, a hunger to devour. It seemed that this black liquid was like a tonic to it. Given this, Su Chi naturally wouldn't miss this opportunity. He had already allowed Dark Star to devour a large part of his belongings, including the thunderclap bone-shattering hammer, ping-pong paddles, and so on. It could morph into any weapon it had devoured, all while retaining its original attribute. The most twisted aspect was that the inherent weapon attribute could be enhanced due to Dark Star's own nature, showing potential for growth. As to why it was called Dark Star, it was because its form was not yet unlocked, and for now it wasn't worthy of the name Death Star Annihilation. Additionally, the most important reason was that such a name was too ostentatious, and changing it would be more prudent. Before the baptism, I want to remind you of something. The old man had already sensed the restlessness beneath the human skin. Those parasitic liquids were even more eager than before. Your sins are more severe than you imagine. Perhaps you require a longer and more extensive baptism process. Alrighty. Su Chi was well aware of old Mandang's intentions. The more parasitic poison liquid that was absorbed, the more one would be affected, and it even seemed to be able to fuse with the host, causing some changes. But right now, these are all conjectures. Let's first see what use this thing actually has. Su Chi wore a smile and stabbed down with the dagger. The black liquid burst out abruptly. These mysterious parasites, upon seeing the host, attacked like the most tempting food, frantically rushing forward. But the dark star in Su Chi's hand trembled slightly, not because it couldn't bear it, but because it too was incredibly excited, thrilled, as if starving to an extreme, swallowing up the black liquid with even more terrifying frenzy. The parasitic poison liquid seemed to momentarily pause, even wanting to retreat. But they had no chance to escape. In an instant, Dark Star ferociously consumed them completely. Su Chi, you're going too fast. It's hard for me to act. And the old man's eyes also showed a trace of astonishment. When others were integrated with the parasite, it took at least a dozen seconds. So why did the black liquid disappear in just an instant? The old man and Su Chi locked eyes. The latter coughed and brought his hands together. Amen. No, Venerable. Su Chi sincerely said, I have felt the power of the Venerable. I have felt the purification. Please allow me to continue the baptism. The black patterns on his body surged, more tumultuous than before. However, the old man did not refuse. Instead he said with a light smile, Of course. He knew full well the terror of the black liquid. The fact that the other party absorbed it so swiftly only meant that the parasitic poison liquid was greatly interested in him, which also indicated a perfect degree of fusion. More perfect than anyone else in this world. How could he possibly interfere? He must complete the task given by the Venerable, and when the Venerable returned, to see such a perfect parasite would surely bring immense joy. While Su Chi was undergoing his baptism, in another world, an old-fashioned academic academy, a man in a robe was sitting cross-legged in front of a group of students, with drawings of interconnected lines beside him. He looked at the many students and spoke gently. Research, study, civilization, science can drive everything forward. Even for a king, there is no shortcut on the road to scholarly pursuits. The beauty of science lies in the ability to find regularities amidst all complexity. Just like, the robed figure gently stroked his white beard. Given a fulcrum, I could lift our entire world. The students listened to this sentence with a mix of confusion and contemplation. Some couldn't understand, others pondered hard. Someone shook their head. Teacher, lifting our world, how could such a thing be possible? Are you God? Legend has it that the great King Gerba could move mountains and cross seas. But that doesn't seem as exaggerated as what you're saying, teacher. The robed figure looked kindly at the crowd. Their era was rife with wars, focusing on crafting bows, arrows, and combat strategies, whereas these scholarly pursuits were like enlightenment to the many students present, seeds of thought beginning to sprout. God does not exist. There are patterns to everything that can be traced. I believe you will quickly understand. The robed figure suddenly found himself at a loss for words, because many students were staring blankly at the distant sky dome. They were teaching outdoors because their teacher, the robed figure, believed that a broader view was beneficial for thinking, freeing them from the shackles of their previous thoughts. Chapter 351, The Great Venerable. At that very moment, they naturally realized something was amiss right away. What is that? Someone muttered. Am I seeing things? Teacher, why has a vortex appeared from the sky dome, and someone is coming out of it? The robed figure's pupils contracted with a hint of surprise as he looked toward the distance. A beam of holy light shone down, and 3 figures were slowly emerging from within the ripples. What in the world is happening? Although he lacked any particularly prescient knowledge, based on his own research, he believed more in science than in so-called theology. And now, something that defied all his knowledge had occurred. The crowd stared dumbfounded at the few people illuminated by the holy light landing on the ground, slowly walking toward them. Many students spontaneously murmured and knelt down. It's the miracle of King Gerba. From the legend. The miracle has manifested. And the robed figure opened his mouth. He opposed theological thoughts, idolatry, insisting on equality and enlightenment. But now he found himself at a loss for words. You? Who are you? His voice couldn't help but tremble. The 3 figures were dressed in pure white, with 2 of them wearing gentle smiles on their faces, while the one in the middle slowly sat before a statue, a symbol of their academy's knowledge. His face was deeply lined with very pronounced wrinkles, looking very old, yet his eyes conveyed a tranquil peace. We are the saviors. Someone among the 2 softly spoke. Following the Venerable's instruction, we've come to rescue you. Venerable, words he'd never heard, people he'd never seen, and those bizarre scenes all gave him a very bad feeling. The robed figure's expression turned slightly solemn. His intuition told him that all was not right, that despite the gentle smiles on the faces of the people before him, he sensed a profound chill. He stood in front of the students, alert, and said, "Sorry, esteemed guests, but I must ask, what does rescue mean?" And the person sitting before the statue spoke softly. "What does rescue mean?" His voice was raspy, yet it carried a strange magic that involuntarily drew people in. Do you know what the greatest weakness of mankind is? It's desire. That's the source of all sins. Hunger, love, the urge to kill, are all sins. To cleanse oneself of sins, to liberate oneself from desire, that is what rescue means. The robed figure seemed bewildered, but the next moment, his pupils slightly contracted as he snapped out of his earlier trance, unsure of his condition just moments before, and grew increasingly uneasy as he firmly said, "That's not what rescue is. Desire itself is the essence of existence. Without desires, a person is incomplete. To control oneself within desires, that is true rescue." He wasn't any ignorant fool. He grasped the most advanced ideas of his era and was a passionate opponent of many theological schools and a proponent of the Enlightenment. He had participated in numerous debates, and all theological schools wished they could silence him swiftly. If not for the support of the monarch, he couldn't have managed the academy, perhaps wouldn't have even survived. But this person before him wasn't like those from theological schools. His pupils focused on the robed figure before him, revealing a slightly warm smile. "What is your name?" The robed figure was slightly stunned, uttering 2 words, "Jimmy Dale." "Mr. Jimmy Dale, your views are quite interesting and seem to disagree with everything I just mentioned." However, the person did not counter-argue but merely smiled lightly. "But I don't blame you. After all, the quest for knowledge is also a desire, and ignorance is also a sin. You are different from the ignorant people of this world. Next, I will lead you to liberation from these overwhelming desires." Jimmy Dale was slightly startled. Liberation? And the figure leaned against the statue adorned with geometrical shapes symbolizing enlightenment and science, gently saying, "But before I lead you to liberation, the others must dispense with their sins." Jimmy Dale had yet to grasp the meaning of this being's words. The next moment, the 2 standing beside suddenly vanished from the spot. Jimmy Dale widened his eyes. It wasn't that they disappeared. Their speed was just too fast. Both appeared instantly behind Jimmy Dale, in front of the bewildered students. "Wait, what are you doing?" Jimmy Dale instantly sensed danger, and nothing could stop it. Boom! A terrifying fluctuation burst out around the 2, like ripples. Jimmy Dale couldn't explain any of it. It was all completely different from anything he had ever learned. And the next moment, his pupils shrank. His many students had been dazed before, but now they became rigid to the extreme, then each slowly knelt to the ground. Blood flowed from their orifices. Jimmie Dale looked at this scene with fear, his eyes filled with intense despair and pain. "What have you done to them? Quick! Wake up!" He crazily rushed forward, picked up his students and tried to wake them up. This teacher, nearly 100 years old, was now so pained that his body trembled. Jimmie Dale looked up, stared at them intently, his eyes devoid of fear, only filled with rage, and said in a raspy voice, "Why did you kill them?" "Kill them? No," the person sitting there softly said. "They are merely being liberated, returning to the Venerable's embrace. Each person's sins will be cleansed step by step. And now," he softly said, "it's time for them to truly utilize their remaining heat." He waved his hand grandly. Slowly, he opened a box filled with a vast amount of strange scent. A large amount of black liquid suddenly burst forth. Like living things, it surged toward all surrounding life forms, wanting to parasitize them wildly. Jimmie Dale watched this scene in fear. His worldview and past common sense had now completely collapsed. More importantly, those two had also released some terrifying fog. Crazily heading toward the many corpses, only a violent sizzling sound could be heard. A large amount of flesh was dissolving, bones melting. Only a human skin was left. Both persons simultaneously acted, sealing all the black liquid inside. Jimmie Dale stood dumbfounded, looking at these scenes, his body suddenly trembling. A strand of black liquid climbed up from beneath his feet, burrowing into his body. It was uncomfortable, suffocating. Feeling both his body and soul were bound, he trembled and half-knelt on the ground, staring intensely at the three people in front of him. "Who in the world are you? You may call me Venerable." This being's voice was somewhat gentle, with a smile on his face. Venerable. Jimmie Dale was somewhat puzzled, as the other party had mentioned the name Venerable multiple times, and now claimed it himself. It seemed he had noticed what Jimmie Dale was thinking. "Anyone who saves sentient beings can inherit the name of Venerable," this figure said with a light smile. Jimmie Dale looked at his chest where black patterns were spreading. He knelt on the ground with a sense of despair and lowered his head. "Why didn't you kill me?" "Because you are a qualified instructor, possessing the qualifications to become venerable," this person softly said. Though the other was just an ordinary person, the black parasitic liquid was crazily trying to climb onto his body. The marks of fate on him, his thoughts, were all extraordinary. Such talent needed to be brought back to his own world. "You!" Jimmie Dale felt a sense of being insulted, shouted in anger. "Do you think I would do the same as you? Rather than being captured and living meagerly, I'd rather die." He directly went toward the thick wall nearby and violently ran into it. But the next moment, a strange sound exploded in his ear. His body became instantly stiff. "What have you done to me?" Jimmie Dale felt surprised as he realized his body couldn't move. "This is the power of the Venerable," this entity with a smile said. "But you don't have to fear resistance because, once you're in the new world, you'll quickly change your way of thinking." Chapter 352. Chaotic. Jimmie Dale gazed into the vast expanse of void, his eyes wide with astonishment and his expression one of shock. Half a day had passed since he was forcibly taken away. During this time, Jimmie Dale had witnessed too many inconceivable events and experienced the mystery that couldn't be understood. Starting from the collapse of his core beliefs to a sense of hopelessness about the unknown, and then gradually to calmness and understanding, he was absorbing and learning everything he had seen at an incredibly exaggerated speed. And he had also seen the cruelty of these three people. His original world was merely a starting point. Each time, the three of them would use a strange device to travel through nihility and descend upon the next world, to then repeat the previous slaughter and store the black liquid in the skin from people of different worlds. Meanwhile, the person who was called Venerable was meditating with his eyes closed. He was different from the other two. Black liquid would occasionally crawl all over his body. The other two were more like protectors, but they were also discussing something unintelligible to him. The great being's recovery stumbled a month ago. Today marks the third day since the Venerable's recovery plan kicked off. We've almost finished sealing these things away. The Venerable's voice softly came through. It's time to contact the higher-ups. Understood. The two of them looked a bit sinister, and in Jimmy Dale's view, they opened their own clothes, revealing a pattern that would induce endless terror at a mere glance. What was that? Jimmy Dale stared at the black pattern questioningly. It featured an eye at the center. The flames that surrounded it seemed to be burning in a circle as if performing a ritual. No. Intense black fog violently erupted from the pattern. A strange aura with a strong pollution swirled and converged together fiercely. Phantom-like shadows danced within the black fog. Slowly, a phantom figure appeared. The two immediately bowed respectfully. Lord Apostle! The aura of the black shadow before them was extremely powerful, far beyond that of any seventh rank, and the hierarchy within the cult was extremely strict. Even though they were called venerable in their own world, to those above, they were no more than ants, not to mention many terrifying and ancient beings which were beyond their reach had started to awaken. They immediately reported the progress of their task. The phantom figure slowly spoke. Fine, I am aware. Prepare yourselves, for someone will arrive in your world to handle the collection. The two bowed their heads. Lord Apostle, so soon? Don't we continue to cultivate? The phantom calmly looked at them. The two shuddered and immediately lowered their heads. We apologize, Lord. They were there only to obey orders, without the possibility of questioning or defiance. The phantom slowly turned away, speaking slowly. Everything is being accelerated now. The great being of the abyss is growing impatient. Next, the abyss believers will no longer hide. Under the highest command of Abyss Will and the Venerable Plan, conduct activities across the 10,000 realms. The two trembled, their expressions a mix of fear and excitement. They knew what these words meant. The abyss power that had been lying dormant for so long, the vast yet discreetly moving cultists, were finally about to make waves in the present world. Also, you? The angel envoy calmly looked at the one who had been meditating in the distance. Being selected as one of the venerables does not mean that you can now ignore my words. The venerable's figure slowly materialized before the phantom, with a slight smile, gently pressing hands together. I am well aware that among the many venerables chosen, I am but an inconspicuous one. But his form was suddenly covered with a large amount of black liquid. In the depths of his eyes was an extraordinary madness. This momentary display even made the phantom figure pause, not speaking a word. The black liquid retreated just as quickly, and the venerable in white robes looked at the phantom with a gentle smile. Lord Apostle, what do you think? The phantom was silent, then after a long moment, spoke slowly. I never expected that you would merge with so much. It paused, then uttered two words, strength. It seems you will soon grow stronger. The venerable kept his smile. Everything is solely for the greatness of the god. The phantom did not speak further, instead slowly dissipating. The two beside let out a faint breath, watching as the black fog returned to the totem. Jimmy Dale silently observed the scene before him. Although he had only just begun to explore the outside world and understand all the new things, he also understood. These people seemed to be discussing something fearsome. The organization behind them was probably unimaginable. And in his heart, he held a very pessimistic attitude. After all, they had no hesitation about his presence, which meant that his fate was firmly controlled in the hands of these people. They were not afraid of him taking any other action. The venerable's eyes faintly smiled. Let's continue on, we still have a few worlds to pass through. We should be almost there. In the meantime, let's seal the last of the chaotic. The two nodded. Understood, Venerable. Chaotic? Jimmy Dale had a keen interest in studying all kinds of knowledge. He had so many questions about that black liquid. And at this moment, as he watched, the black liquid began writhing on the Venerable's body again. The Venerable stretched out his hand in fascination. The black liquid seemed to be one with him, and their emotions were in sync. Precious. Liquid that only the sinful can bear. Chapter 353. Chaotic. Countless feared the chaotic, yet it possessed endless possibilities. This was a horror, a symbiont with infinite potentials. Existing alone it would quickly perish. Only by parasitizing a host could it coexist. And more importantly, it could integrate into all attributes, perfectly fit all powers, but its side effect was to feed on sin. Those sinful could integrate even more perfectly. And those without murderous intent, ordinary people untainted by evil, within a few days of integration, would be influenced by the chaotic, their consciousness entirely altered to only commit murder and evil as monsters. Regrettably, we are all followers of the great evil God, all sinners. Venerable gazed at his own black patterns, his faith in the evil God bolstered by the polluted power protecting him, able to integrate more of the chaotic and tame them. This was the confidence the great evil God brought him. Venerable's eyes gleamed with frenzied faith. Venerable, the plan will definitely succeed. Jimmy Dale saw him covered in a mass of black liquid that crawled over him, forming armor, then swiftly shedding it. He looked terrified, observing the black patterns on his body, becoming extremely uneasy. They walked, stopping intermittently, harvesting, sealing, heading toward their own world. Most were native worlds, but there were also some low-level and present world realms with informational contact, though to them it meant nothing. They were just a group stepping into the sequence. How interesting, these quasi-sequential ones. They're known as Qi cultivation. The most powerful person in this civilization is merely 3 at Foundation establishment, that is 7th rank. They still went through with the massacre, they, being 7th rank, indisputably overpowering this world, no one could resist. Only, amid a ground littered with corpses, the 2 read a message from their developed wristwatches. They even received quite some information from the present world, were actually preparing for ascension, looking for opportunities in nearby regions to break through the lack of spiritual energy in the end of Dharma era. They broke into smiles. Really? Interesting. Sadly, they'll never make that step. Here's another message, Su Buxian. Someone with a slightly raised eyebrow said, "What a familiar name. That's the youngster from the bounty in the anxious land a month ago." His companion slightly smiled, having heard of the Rainbow Bridge incident. Although a month had passed, the excitement hadn't cooled, various forces were still probing, the intensity considerable. Because many forces knew that Su Buxian's sequence wasn't high, yet he possessed precious items unmatched by his current strength. If only someone could find him first, they could split everything. Didn't expect. The bounty's news spread so wide. Even I'm tempted by the reward offered. The 2 clicked their tongues. Based on earlier information, that youngster's sequence is around 9, having escaped under the sanctuary of the anxious land. Despite possessing incredibly precious treasures, he'd likely be instantly annihilated if discovered. Venerable glanced at the name too. Text translated from the 10,000 Realms spiritual ability signal received by the wristwatch. He said calmly, "Stop looking. Just a person who's accidentally had some good fortune." Now, in this era, everyone was madly rising, otherwise, he wouldn't have become a follower of the evil god, now having acquired extraordinary powers. That youngster's possessions shouldn't belong to him. If encountered, he would naturally easily take everything from him. "You?" Venerable looked at Jimmy Dale. He suddenly spoke, startling Jimmy Dale, who was silently observing everything, learning everything. His body jerked slightly, his teeth clenched as he spoke. "What? Before your mind is remodeled, saved, they'll teach you some common sense. The urgent desire of the chaotic to devour you tells me your wisdom is indeed highly favored." Warm sunlight spread inside the spacious church. On the clean floor, once again sat hundreds of people in pure white clothing. Indeed, there were more people. They wore warm smiles, their bodies gently swaying to the soothing sound of a violin, as if their spirits were thereby lifted and happiness ensued. The young man also sat among them, wanting to sway, but he couldn't. His eyes somewhat blankly watched the person playing the violin above. Su Qi, with a smiling face, played the violin, softly singing. When difficulties arise, please raise your left hand. The left hand represents the direction. It will not bow down to hardships. When encountering setbacks, please raise your right hand. The right hand represents hope. It won't fret over setbacks. The sung words carried a healing effect. But the young man couldn't understand. How did it turn into Su Buxian? Moreover, most importantly, the people around were very cooperative, raising their left and right hands as if they were intoxicated by the experience. The young man stammered, "What exactly is going on?" Yesterday, his initiation was interrupted by Su Buxian's manipulation. He didn't undergo the baptism and was even ignored, and although his body was in pain, he was somewhat lucid at the time. Everything here is wrong. All the people are not normal. And it was Su Buxian who endured it all for him. The music ended. People, smiling, broke into thunderous applause. An elderly man beside them softly coughed, signaling everyone to quiet down, and the applause gradually faded. The old man brought his hands together. "We thank the new creator, Su, for bringing solace to our minds." "Thank you." The crowd thanked him with smiles. The old man, observing the spiritual state of the people, slightly curved his lips upward. Although the song was different from the repeated ones heard before, the one just played was pretty good too. At the same time, the old man's gaze turned to Su Qi, who was smiling. This fellow had absorbed too much chaos yesterday, something he had never seen in anyone else, except the Venerable himself. To be cautious, he paused the other's baptism, deciding to first control the other's mind instead. Every element of this world was constantly filled with mental influence. The sounds of the violin, the chants in the church, the surrounding fragrances, the hanging sunset, etc., subtly changed the mental states of these low-level sequencers. This was the power of the Venerable after being infested with chaos. The Venerable will be extremely delighted upon his return, the old man thought, watching Su Qi, who seemed to blend in with the crowd while carrying a small violin. His face filled with a peaceful and indulgent smile just like the others. Even Su Qi then set down the violin, bringing his hands together. "Venerable above us all." The crowd also sanctimoniously followed suit, chanting, "Venerable above us all." The young man too joined in, his body trembling as he chanted. He didn't understand why his mind was so clear at that moment and wasn't influenced. Everything before his eyes seemed utterly absurd, and the transformation of Su Qi filled him with despair. "So," the old man said with a light smile, "it's time to move on to the next activity. Today would be led by Su Qi, and the level of influence would be several times stronger." However, Su Qi did not proceed with the next activity as mentioned, but instead, softly threw the violin aside and took out a suona. "Easy, old man. I've still got a show to run." The old man's smile stiffened. The next moment, a piercing sound filled the church, impacting everyone's eardrums and souls, rendering their expressions momentarily vacant. The old man's eyes widened. What kind of instrument is this? Such a powerful, penetrating sound. At the same time, he inexplicably felt a chill, including the others present. Some had slightly itching noses, some briefly blurred their eyes, and their backs felt as if something was attached. Cold, shivering. But in front of this astonishing, soul-stirring suona, it was quickly overlooked. The young man didn't feel much, just blankly gazing at Su Qi and his suona. "It sounds quite nice." After the piece ended, Su Qi slowly set down the suona. Probably only he in the entire paradise would take up more than a dozen item slots with various sundries. This item was also one of his general goods. But that was not important. Su Qi's left eye held a gentle smile, his white garments blending with the sunlight, muttering, "Thank the Venerable," while his right eye carried a dark, deep shadow, a multitude of ghost faces shrieking and rushing out, clinging to every person around. He then uttered the next phrase, "Absolve the sins." In this place full of evildoers, weird black liquid, and countless filthy, cruel methods. Sorry, he was indeed the most evil of them all. Chapter 354. I want to be a venerable. Worship, parade, prayer. The park, dense with flowers and grass, surrounded the fountain where people sang songs. They also ate freshly baked, fragrant pastries, sitting on the grass and enjoying the sunshine and afternoon tea. Such was a beautiful day in this town. Only the young boy was shivering in fear. Though this day was filled with peace and everyday life, and everything seemed so normal, beautiful, and leisurely. But the boy, fully awake, could see that every corner, every aspect of this place was filled with cruelty. The hidden sins were much thicker than imagined. The tiles of the church conceal various rotting viscera. Below the soil among the flowers and grass lies the foul stench of blood drenched. The trees bear the traces of torture devices. And the bread from the oven and those afternoon snacks all reek of foulness. The boy almost vomited, but he dared not react. For some reason, his mind was unusually clear, and the ability to repeatedly escape during pursuits had returned. Now he was well aware of the current situation. Many people are forced into this world. The only ones who survive are those who assimilate into everything. Those who sense something wrong, struggle, resist, or run away are completely killed. The boy held the tea in his palm, pretending to drink but daring not to taste it. Everything here had a hallucinogenic effect, including the food. Even if his head knew he was facing death, he did not want to become one of those blurred in consciousness, blending in with everyone, and genuinely grateful to the venerable. Danger. Everything was extremely dangerous. Though everyone here seemed like ordinary people, smiling comfortably and enjoying everything. Sometimes they would warmly greet him, offering him food. But the eeriness, bloodiness, and darkness of the entire town told him that once these people showed their true nature, they would be vicious and brutally murderous. They all had a lethal nature and a bloodlust that not even white garments could conceal. I must escape, otherwise when the venerable returns, I fear I'll never have a chance again. However, the boy looked at the black pattern on his chest, then looked up at Su Chi, who originally seemed like a normal person, now turned the host of the parade. He felt deeply despondent, with a sense of desperate sorrow. Can I really escape? Soon, the sunset appeared in the sky, and the sunlight faded. The crowd also ended their day at the park, leaving cheerfully, not the least bit tired. And the boy's eyes slightly darkened as he returned to his place first. Everyone had a separate room, where he could at least breathe a sigh of relief at night. Yet, he could still sense numerous gazes secretly watching him. As the new guy, unless he completely assimilated like them and entirely changed, he would always be under the surveillance of sinister gazes. Thinking of escaping seemed like mere folly. And there's not much time left. The boy clenched his teeth. Based on the information from today's tea party, the Venerable and two protectors were scheduled to return tomorrow. The Venerable, whom everyone devoutly worshipped. What kind of dangerous entity was he? Once that entity returned, he probably would truly have no chance to leave. So, I must escape tonight. The boy's eyes were resolute as he made his decision. His abilities were not weak. He even had surprising talent and potential, but was unfortunately forced to flee, inadvertently getting involved in this perilous place. Now to wait. He would wait until everyone had gone to sleep, until the late hours of the night, using some of his evasion tools to see if he could avoid the surveilling gazes and find a chance to escape. The boy turned off the light. In the dark environment, only his faint breathing could be heard. The surroundings were extremely quiet, the empty window frame allowing the pale moonlight to be seen. At night, it seemed everyone was resting. Lying quietly for a while longer, the boy slowly got up, took a deep breath, and quietly left the room. For some reason, he felt that the surveilling gazes around him were gone. The surrounding silence was terrifying. Cautiously treading around the house, looking back several times as he headed toward the central area. According to everything in this world, the residents have no channels to leave, but the Venerable, along with the protectors, can leave this world, which means there's a transportation ritual in place. After all, if this Venerable could tear through the spatial channel, his power must be similar to that of a family head. If he was a Sequence 5, there would be no need to establish this town. Of course, if he was wrong, so be it. The boy's mind was very clear right now. He wasn't just playing along today, but was gathering various pieces of information, assessing everything. The existence of this transportation ritual should be in the central Venerable Garden, where the baptisms take place and is also guarded. The boy recalled today's experiences. Apart from the baptism, today's garden visit was the only place I hadn't approached close to. The boy had a plan and clues, and immediately began to act. First is the guard. Very tricky. He had noticed on the first day that there were many guards in the Venerable Garden, at least 10. They did not mingle like the residents, never participating in parades, but a dangerous aura could faintly be sensed from them. Chapter 355. He knew he had to take the risk stealthily, without making any noise. The young man took a deep breath, lifted the dagger in his hand, and gently peeked his head out. What caught his eyes, however, were not the guards clad in white. It was an entirely empty entrance. The young man was somewhat dumbfounded. Where are the people? He cautiously walked inside, but he didn't see anyone for a long time. Strange. Too strange. The young man's calm heart became intensely uneasy as he continued towards the Venerable Garden, where there were statues of the Venerable. It was a vast manor, the usual residence of the Venerable, and ominously quiet. There was no sound to be heard, but even as he cautiously pushed the door open, he still saw no one. The hallway, the empty rooms, the staircase leading up. What on earth is going on? The young man held his breath and headed for the deepest part. The further in he went, the more he saw, some ghastly things. Of course, this ghastly referred to actual bones. It seemed that because no outsiders dared to enter here, they were openly displayed around the corridors. Ugh! The young man nearly vomited. Pinned on the walls were all sorts of eerie and cruel paintings, photographs depicting their past killings, cooking of flesh and blood, pursuit of fugitives, skinning and breaking of bones. Compared to the pleasant scenes of the town outside, it was like a totally different concept. The more the young man looked, the more disgusted he felt, his stomach churning. Many had crossed far beyond what a person should endure, each image capable of generating immense fear. And on the paintings, he found messages inscribed in various handwriting. All of them records of slaughters, or the cruel manipulation of rebels and those whom the Venerable's strength had not accepted. The young man also saw another, much larger photograph. Those guilty possessed the ability to resist the Venerable's strength, and after lurking for 2 months, they collaborated with other newcomers for a massive joint rebellion and escape. These people, unwilling to accept the Venerable's salvation, have been dealt with by many devout residents, commemorated in photographs. In the photograph, loads of corpses, dismembered flesh. The scene was extremely bloody. More importantly, the young man looked at the photograph of the many residents in terror. There wasn't a trace of an ordinary resident's demeanor on any of them, each covered in a black liquid, like black monsters, with flames casting long shadows that highlighted their horrifying grins with menacing clarity. Every one of them was lethally spine-chilling. Behind the residents on the high platform stood the Venerable Manor's followers, those who controlled and presided over everything, clad in white and maintaining smiles, seemingly chanting praises for the Venerable. Every one of them is a demon. Every one of them is terror, cruelty, an existence that slaughters everything. The young man clenched his teeth, the fear in his heart involuntarily making it difficult for him to move his legs. Now! The young man looked towards the door at the end of the corridor, shaking slightly all over, yet he still stepped forward. The door grew nearer and nearer. But at the same time, the door wasn't completely closed, leaving a crack, through which the young man seemed to hear vague voices coming from inside. His heart sank to the bottom. His body was numb to the extreme. But he had to take this step. He had already noticed that around him there were faint traces of spirit coins, with energy quietly stirring, which meant that this manor, and perhaps the entire venerable garden, was enveloped in a ritual. It was not just to prevent people from entering and discovering all of this, but also because a teleportation ritual existed in this place. Retreating now would mean losing all chance. He must. Bang! The crack in the door was suddenly burst open. A figure appeared at the door, startling the young man, as the person in front of him was one of the followers. His face was expressionless, holding a bloodied dagger, staring fixedly at the young man. The pungent smell of blood made the young man's pupils contract, and in the next moment, the trembling he had felt just before vanished, as he let out a low roar and burst forth. D. When it came to the most lethal moment, the young man became even calmer. But the next second, the dagger penetrated the other person's body. The young man was startled, only to see the follower motionless, his expression unchanged, with blood flowing from his 7 orifices. Then, the follower fell to the ground with a thunderous crash. The young man's expression froze. At the same time, he also saw everything inside the room, his eyes trembling. What is this? The whole room was filled with corpses. The overwhelming smell of blood was intense to the extreme. All of them were the followers of the venerable manor, those who had presided over everything, following the venerable's will. Why has everyone died? And the youth stared with trembling eyes at the elder whose head hung low, his body covered in black liquid that crazily leaped about. He wasn't dead yet. Only his limbs had been severed, with a dagger thrust into his mouth, nailed him to the wall. The old man's face was filled with shock, anger, and madness. He wanted to say something, but he could only make whimpering noises. The faint voice he had just barely heard was his. The youth blankly watched the elder. The black liquid on the elder's body, along with that powerful aura and strength, were all bursting out, struggling. He immediately recognized that the other's strength was at 7th rank. This was the strongest among all followers, and also the terrifying existence he had always been wary of. But why? Why had he become like this now, even nailed to the wall? And the next moment, footsteps came from inside the room. The old man's expression seemed even more agitated, and that overwhelming killing intent and hatred almost burst forth, yet he was completely unable to move. The terrifying black liquid surged wildly over his body, but it was all restrained by that dagger. The youth was also shocked as he watched the person walking out from the inner room. Ah, Brother Su. Among the corpses on the floor, the youth blankly watched Su Chi calmly holding a book in hand, gently pulling out the venerable's chair to sit down. Whimper, whimper, whimper. The old man struggled furiously, but was powerless. You're slower than I expected, but you've finally arrived. You're passable. Su Chi flicked through the book, speaking softly. What do you mean passable? No, wait. The youth's voice trembled as he looked around. What the hell is going on? Weren't you influenced and became one of them? That's true. Su Chi nodded. Originally, during the day, everyone was joyful and harmoniously getting along, happy and beautiful. But, Su Chi sighed, after I made a small request, they could no longer tolerate me. The youth was startled. What request? I want to become the venerable. The youth's eyes widened. What the hell kind of small request is that? In this crazy place, isn't that outright rebellion? Anyway, they didn't agree, so I had to do it myself. Su Chi smiled as he looked at the old man. Now that those who disagreed are gone, do you agree? Old man. Whimper, whimper, whimper. It seems you agree, Su Chi said lightly. The youth. He was somewhat confused, somewhat shocked, clutching his head. Anyway, Brother Su, you aren't influenced right now, right? Everything this morning was an act. No, I really found it very interesting. The youth looked at Su Chi, silent and unable to understand the person before him. Shouldn't you be shivering in fear of being found out? Where's the fun in that? Anyway, the youth said earnestly in a hoarse voice, Brother Su, let's escape quickly while they're dealt with. The most dangerous are not them, but the many residents in the town, and the venerables who will return tomorrow. He knew from the pictures in the corridor just how deadly terrifying they were. Each of them has a large amount of that black liquid in their bodies. It will turn them into terrifying symbiont black monsters. By then, if we disturb them, we will have no chance to escape. Remembering those images and records, the youth's voice trembled, his body chilled. Don't rush. Su Chi spoke calmly. I told you, I want to be the venerable. The youth was somewhat astonished. Are you not joking? Bullshit. Su Chi waved the book. Look, I'm even reading the Venerable's induction book and have made notes. The youth saw the notes scribbled and drawn on it, and snapped, Damn it! This guy was serious. The mental influence here indeed makes people abnormal, but it only turns them into dangerous husks. It doesn't turn them into lunatics. Damn. But Su Chi just looked at him with a faint smile. And you, Yi, do you want to join this venerable in a big venture? Chapter 356, Evil God. What are you going to do? In the gloomy room, a large number of corpses lay in pools of blood, each dressed in blood-stained white. Only Su Chi sat in a clean chair, leisurely flipping through a book. Among these white-clad followers present, only this old man's strength could reach about 7th rank under the burst of black liquid. It was somewhat troublesome to handle. However, it wasn't a big problem. It took about a few minutes to nail the opponent to the wall with the Dark Star. Su Chi came to understand that the Dark Star dagger could not only devour the black liquid but also suppress its parasitized hosts. This black liquid is quite peculiar, how should I say it, very extraordinary, Su Chi muttered softly. It feels somewhat similar to the deep red from the Anxious Land. At least both were extraordinary substances. It was unclear which was superior. They needed symbiosis, needed a host. That kind of madness for control, wanting to grasp absolute initiative, would gradually devour the host itself. And indeed, this is a powerful strength. Su Chi extended his hand, which also had a lot of black liquid on it. With a slight movement, his entire palm turned into a black claw, and with his will he lunged forward, tearing a hole in the iron wall. The old man nailed to the wall bulged his eyes, whimpering in shock that Su Chi had mastered this power so quickly. Su Chi smiled slightly. What? Got something to say? He sat in the chair and waved his finger lightly. The Dark Star dagger automatically protruded a bit from the old man's throat. Of course, it didn't let him down but plunged back into his chest again with a puff. Ah! The old man let out a painful moan, his body spasming from the pain, and the black liquid parasitizing him struggled as well. After these people merged with the black liquid, unless a fatal brain injury that couldn't be recovered was caused, it was still very difficult to kill them, as the black liquid would quickly heal the wounds, of course, at a cost. You are doomed. The old man stared at Su Chi with bloodshot eyes. Foolish, ignorant one. You will pay a heavy price for everything you have done. Su Chi casually raised his hand. The Dark Star dagger stabbed viciously into his flesh, churning continuously. The old man screamed even more miserably, and the Dark Star dagger was greedily absorbing the black liquid from the old man's body, coating the dagger with layer upon layer of black. Although this thing felt as bizarre as the deep red power, the most important thing was that it could parasitize, could combine with everything as a symbiont. If the Dark Star could devour, does that also imply it could be wielded? Su Chi had a bold idea. At that moment, the old man trembled weakly, but his face still bore a mad look, and a slowly emerging, somewhat horrific smile with blood seeping from the corners of his mouth. You have no idea what the venerable represents. Nor do you understand how terrifying these black substances are. And even less so, the enormity behind us. Is that so? Su Chi looked at the old man. I think my backing is pretty huge too. Venerable doesn't seem very famous. What's your background? Ha ha. The old man let out a hoarse, strange laugh as if he had heard something extremely funny, laughing so hoarsely that he even started coughing violently. Perhaps you do not recognize the name of the Venerable, but you must have heard of the term abyss. Su Chi's expression paused, shutting the book. The abyss. Isn't that the second home I've never met? He had considered the origin of the Venerable and the source of this series of bizarre black liquids and inexplicable rituals. Yet, he had not expected it to be related to the abyss. And the young man nearby, helping Su Chi sort things out, shuddered upon hearing that, showing an uneasy reaction, turned his head, and his pupils constricted as he looked at the old man. The old man also sensed the movements of Su Chi and the young man, revealing a smile. I can feel your inner fear. His voice became hoarser, laughing even more madly. After all, we are followers of the abyss. We are the disciples of the great evil god. The name of the evil god will be created by us, reappearing in the world. The power of the abyss will also corrode everything. Now, the old man stared wildly at Su Chi with a mad laugh. Ignorant mortal, do you understand the vast and terrifying power you are about to face? Su Chi simply looked at him, falling silent. How should I put it? I'm staring at you with the eyes of your own family head. Do you feel it? Meanwhile, the young man next to him shook, deep fear in his eyes as if paralyzed halfway, reacting quite strongly. Evil God! He voiced the words in an extremely fearful, trembling tone, as if the name inflicted a terrible, indelible shadow on him. This guy, Su Chi also noticed this. Seems he's had contact with abyss power before? Seems to have some sort of reflex response. Death, curse, weirdness, pollution, mental breakdown. None of you can escape. Those who dare to obstruct the Venerable's plan will surely be utterly. Ah! He hadn't finished speaking. The flesh on his face trembled violently, and he screamed in agony. Su Chi sheared off the old man's shoulder, and with the utmost sharpness, the dark star dagger easily dislodged several of his ribs. The young man, hearing the painful cries, slowly came back to his senses from the trembling, astonished at the old man's ghastly state. Chapter 357. Ah Su. A bit dazed, he said, He's a cultist. Don't kill him. Su Chi looked at the corpses scattered on the ground. What did you say? The youth then realized he had gotten a bit too panicked, as there was only one person left alive. His eyes slightly lowered, and in a hoarse voice filled with gravity he said, It seems you still don't know. When cultists are killed, the pollution power within them will follow you like a relentless parasite, frantically attaching to you and then consuming you. He bent down and lifted the white clothing from the bodies on the ground. Indeed, on each one was a black pattern entirely different from the many town residents. The pattern bore strange eyes. One glance would make you feel as though falling into the abyss. This also explained why earlier, everyone showed the black stripes beneath their clothes, except for these individuals who didn't react at all. Su Chi calmly opened the book again. No rush. You continue searching for information. Still not panicking? The youth's eyes widened. Your heart is too big. They are all cultists. It's the terrifying power of the abyss. Merely contact brings immense misfortune. Just do as I say. Su Chi spoke softly. Now we have plenty of time, enough information. The advantage is ours. The one pretending to be calm. The old man was also staring intently at Su Chi, laughing crazily. Whatever you try is futile, you can't escape. When the Venerable returns, you will die. Su Chi stretched out his hand, and with a snap, the dark star dagger directly pierced through his throat. However, he didn't completely kill him yet. The old fellow still had his uses. I certainly didn't expect all this to be connected to the evil god. And, although I don't know what kind of being that Venerable is, nor what role he plays in the abyss cult, this old guy mentioned the 4 words Venerable's plan. I have a bad feeling about this. Su Chi flipped through the books in his hands, which recorded the notes of that Venerable murder, chaotic rituals, methods of communicating with the above, etc. He had already seen plenty of information. For instance, there's more than one Venerable, It seems to be a kind of sacred title. Those who inherit the title seem to achieve infinite glory and are sculpted into beings worshipped by countless people. The incident in the anxious land just ended, and they're quickly planning something new. However, Su Qi understood that their power seemed to have nearly reached a peak, about to burst forth, opening the prologue between the present world and the abyss. This point was the information revealed to him by the traveling merchant. "Ah, Su, these are all the materials about chaotic and the rituals I found." The youth was capable, very quickly finding many forbidden books in the Venerable's study and retrieving valuable information from them. And here it mentions the whole town is covered by a mind-controlling ritual. The transmission array and other key elements seem to be in that location. But the youth shook his head. "Yet I can find no clues." Normal, after all, such a confidential area isn't that easy to find. And there's no need to look for it. Su Qi casually flipped through the materials brought to him. "Everything will become clear tomorrow." He learned that the black liquid is known as chaotic, an extremely precious substance possessed by the upper echelons of the cultists, which they cultivate and absorb a sufficient amount of sin before gathering it together. The purpose of the gathering, although not specified in the information, Su Qi knew must be linked to the so-called Venerable's plan. And Su Qi looked at the window that popped up in front of him again. Main quest. Escape. This is a town of terror and strangeness, filled with dangerously wicked people. And there seems to be a tremendous secret hidden deep within. Players, please seize every opportunity to escape. He didn't know how many times Paradise sent pop-up alerts, each time seeming to rush Su Qi as if something terrifying was about to happen. But Su Qi didn't bother with it. If he followed the main quest directed by Paradise, that actually would be somewhat similar to the youth's course of action. Sneaking out in the depths of night, avoiding surveillance, entering the Venerable Garden, dodging various taboos and guards, sneaking in stealthily. Then he would discover all sorts of photos in the corridor, revealing the dangers of the town. Next, finding an opportunity to enter the Venerable's room, uncovering secrets and clues, then searching for the transmission array. Of course, if he wanted to lower the difficulty, it would mean teaming up with the newcomer youth. But only. Su Qi completely ignored them and headed straight to the Watcher's location, pulled them into the magic cube domain, and directly crushed the cube. Then he entered the Venerable Garden and gathered all the guardians into the Venerable's room. He commenced a siege on them. Everything that was happening had long since deviated from the main plot. Initially, Su Qi was interested in the chaotic, but now that he had discovered the abyss, evil gods, and other clues, he was even more determined not to overlook them. "Now," Su Qi slowly stood up. "It's about time to leave this place." There was no more information to be had. The young man paused slightly and pointed at the elderly man struggling against the wall. "What about him?" "Bring him along," Su Qi said with a smile. The old man stared intently at Su Qi, who was strolling casually. He could barely tell if this person was just acting tough. After all, countless people who heard their names harbored fear, dread, and fled in terror. And now, he didn't care at all. The young man picked up the old man and carried him on his shoulder. He had been unwillingly drawn into this, but there were no other options at present because the transmission array had indeed been concealed. He had seen the information he needed to see and found no clues. Before him, he could only follow the actions of this brother Su. However, the other party made him somewhat puzzled since it seemed that Su didn't know about the existence of the Abyss cult or cultists. Their expression hadn't changed just now. It was more like a question asked with interest. Could it be that he's from the native world, someone who has had no exchange of information with the present world? That was a possibility. The young man carried the old man out of the Venerable Garden, speaking as he walked. "That Su, the real danger is not the cultists we see now. Even though they claim to be followers, they haven't merged much with that black liquid. Instead, it's all the townspeople. These thoroughly evil individuals have, over time, fused with a large amount of the black liquid and their spiritual wills are highly unified. Once it bursts, we will have nowhere to bury our dead." His tone was very serious, with a slight tremble. After all, the photos in the corridor had profoundly shocked his young mind. You've got one thing wrong. Su Qi, walking ahead, spoke softly. The real danger isn't them. The young man was taken aback. Is it the imminent arrival of the Venerable and his protectors? According to the information, the Venerable and 2 protectors had gone out and would return tomorrow. Being the existence devoutly worshipped by countless people here, the Venerable must hold a great threat.
No.
Su Qi shook his head yet again. The real danger is this town. The young man paused again, observing the surrounding town. The dark night was upon them, with little light to be seen, but the pervasive, heart-stirring fear seemed like something was burrowing into his spirit. Yet, standing beside Su Qi, it seemed to be blocked. What do you mean? You'll find out tomorrow, Su Qi said quietly. Ever since arriving here, he felt everything was eerily familiar, especially that spiritual influence. No matter where in the town, one would gradually succumb and become one of the town's blissful residents. And they were too reminiscent of the evil god's strength. It was the source of pollution itself, and the pollution would madly decrease sanity, affecting the mind. Previously, he just sensed familiarity but didn't see any indications. After all, there were not a few in the present world who possessed spiritual ability. But now, knowing all this was related to the cultists, linked to the abyss power, and even directly mentioning the evil god, then Su Qi was almost certain of his suspicions. Evil god? What exactly are you planning? Chapter 358, Venerable Descent. We're almost there. The 2 people looked calmly at the ripples in the nihility. According to the information of the ritual, they were gradually approaching that world. The chaotic liquid we've cultivated should have already devoured enough sins and has also been tamed. The Venerable did not speak, but instead sat cross-legged in the midst of the ripples, as the obedient chaotic liquid surged all over his body. Jimmy Dale silently watched this scene, sighing slightly in his expression, losing some despair and gaining a sense of resignation. He just wanted to understand everything outside the world before he died. These past few days, he had continuously heard a lot of information, and the other party did not avoid him at all. It was like, when a master raises a dog, no one minds if a pet overhears things. And Jimmy Dale, he had gradually learned to summarize information, forming concepts about everything, and had even analyzed a great deal. This was his wisdom. He enjoyed studying everything. Geometry, astronomy, mathematics, principles. It was also one of the reasons he could become a pioneer in the old age. Present world, sequence, abyss. Jimmy Dale repeated these words in his heart, and now he knew that the Venerable was about to return to his own world. When that happened, his fate would be completely decided. We're there. The ripple's messages can already see the projection of our world. Let's go, it's time to enter. The followers of the Venerable, it's time for them to welcome their master. At the same time, the Venerable gently curbed a mysterious smile. It is also time to show their worth. The figures of the 3 were being pulled within the ripples, and traces of the transmission array had been captured. They were passing through the chaotic currents of nihility, arriving directly at the transmission array. And the protector saw Jimmy Dale's face turn bright red, as if he was going to suffocate to death. The protector waved his hand lightly, shielding him with spiritual energy, and calmly said, "We can't let him die. These past few days, he has been somewhat extraordinary. Based on the few words we've spoken, he has thoroughly understood various pieces of information. Despite being a native with decidedly outdated thoughts, in such a short time, he came to understand all the various changes of chaotic." Jimmy Dale's face turned red. His eyes darkened. "How do you know this?" "In your era, in your world," the Venerable said with a faint smile. "The knowledge you possess, the thoughts you hold could become the foundation for future generations. The patterns you discovered might also change ages. But, in the vast expanse of the present world, your knowledge is negligible. However, your wisdom is indeed extraordinary. Even just now, you were analyzing these rituals, transmission arrays, merely ripples twisted, and you have already guessed many of the principles and rules. The Venerable looked at him, showing a smile. "Don't worry, I won't kill you. You are special, with unique and exceptional wisdom. What you lack is simply a sequence path that suits you." The pattern of the cultists flickered in the Venerable's pupils. "I will only make you submit, utterly becoming my servant. And don't even think about doing anything. I can perceive all your thoughts." Jimmie Dale clenched his teeth, staring hard at the pupils of the Venerable before him, as if his all was seen through, his body shrouded in a chill. But the next moment, he despairingly released his powerless hands. He was just an ordinary person. What means had he to resist? Facing the kings of his own world, there could be communication. But facing beings from beyond the world, his fame, research, it was all useless, merely the struggle of an ant. The Venerable's pupils showed a hint of satisfaction. He had felt the helplessness and resignation in the heart of this feeble mortal. And everything around them was changing. The ripples were returning to calm. The distorted visions were also stabilizing. In a few moments, the four of them appeared at the center of the transmission ritual. "Finally, we are back." The Venerable revealed a smile and sniffed at the intense smell of blood and the stench of rot nearly hitting him in the face. Indeed, the familiar scent is comforting. This was the deepest part of the town, and the core of everything, a massive number of corpses and flesh, sealed by various rituals. The polluted strength surged like a torrent beneath the platform. The three of them enjoyed this, but Jimmie Dale immediately vomited. His complexion turned extremely pale. He had never seen such a hellish scene. He was now more certain. These three people, along with the Abyss and the cultists, were all cruel, nefarious, terrorizing beings. Throughout the four seas, he also saw the vast black fog around the transmission ritual and the chaotic, and with just one look, the spiritual power pollution instantly made Jimmie Dale somewhat delirious. It felt as if he wanted to submit at the feet of the Venerable. The surrounding smells of blood and decay became somewhat sweet. Jimmie Dale bit his tongue hard. His mind instantly cleared, somewhat afraid. "What just happened?" "Nothing happened. You just wanted to save, to be liberated," the Venerable said lightly. "Now," the Venerable revealed a mild smile, but in the next instant, it was covered by a mask. "We should go to collect everything now." The Venerable cannot show his face publicly. This rule is very important. It is the first taboo for almost all Venerables. No matter how respected by the cult's beings, there's always a reason for it. Once a Venerable reveals his face in public, the next moment, he would be purged by his own cult's beings. Even he dare not defy this point. Ding ding ding. Chapter 359. The town's bell was tolling. It was the ring for worship and also a welcome sound for the Venerable's return. A sea of town residents, all dressed in white, converged from all directions upon the square of the Venerable garden. Each clasped their hands together. With devout smiles they knelt on the ground. And at that moment, the two protectors also smiled. "It seems they've noticed our return and have made preparations in advance. Venerable, we should go out too," the Venerable softly said. "Then let's go." He relished it all. The liquid on his body, called chaotic, which fed on sin, was very violent and frenzied. If sin was insufficient to merge with the chaotic, it would convulse, suppressing the host, taking the initiative, and gradually devouring into a monster. Thus, with the help of the Abyss evil god sect, he had established this town, home to nothing but evildoers. Each one would undergo baptism, be parasitized by chaotic, and then continuously provide sin for the chaotic. Once stabilized, he would collect it himself, commonly known as curing illness. But even these containers could break, for every single one proclaimed themselves a great evil man. Yet in reality, compared to these cultists, what they did were just some small, unspeakable incidents. The deaths they caused and the skins they peeled on just this one excursion already exceeded the sin of these so-called evildoers. Jimmie Dale could only follow powerlessly. They were leaving from the deepest part and could also feel the breath of the crowd outside, each one praying. The sound gradually carried over. The protector softly said, "It looks like worship has already started. But so early?" The protector beside him pondered lightly. "Didn't it used to start only after the Venerable arrived?" The Venerable furrowed his brows slightly as he looked toward the light outside the corridor, softly saying, "Something's not right. What's wrong? I've not been able to contact the others, and they haven't given me any messages. And listen to what they are chanting." The protectors were slightly startled. They heard the multitude of town residents chanting for words. "Venerable above all." The protector's expression stiffened. Who are they calling? The worshipping had started without the Venerable's presence yet. The figure before them adjusted their mask and softly said, "Who knows?" His calm tone seemed indifferent to everything. But in reality, a faint killing intent had already started to seep out from him, and the chaotic liquid was flowing. And slowly, their silhouettes were appearing behind the crowd. Jimmie Dale was involuntarily caught in the midst, staring blankly at everything here. The perfectly constructed town garden, the beautiful sunlight bathing the square, and in the midst, a dense crowd of thousands. Every resident knelt on the ground, looking frantically towards the center of the square, where a noble throne sat, and on it was a venerable wearing a mask. "Why?" the protector murmured. "There's another venerable. What a coincidence." The venerable, his voice hoarse with an abnormal smile, "I'd like to ask the same question." He looked interested through the pupils of his mask, watching the masked figure under the distant statue's throne. That should have been his place, which now was occupied by someone else. Interesting. Too interesting. Watching the scene before him, he was in no hurry. The other side nodded slightly towards him. Both of their gazes met at that moment, the venerable raising an eyebrow, and the other seemed also to be smiling, a smile that somewhat irked him. "Who are you?" the venerable softly began. "Wearing a mask that doesn't belong to you, sitting on a throne that isn't yours." "Who I am?" The voice came with a hint of laughter. "Haven't they already said it? Tell him loudly who I am." The multitude of residents, hands clasped devoutly, proclaimed, "The Great Venerable." "And them?" The figure propped his head with one hand and pointed at the three of them with the other. The crowd, as if having rehearsed in advance, spoke unanimously. "They are the sinful incarnations impersonating the Venerable. So, what should you do? Eliminate all who dare to offend the Venerable." The multitude of town residents simultaneously turned their heads, a smile on their faces, but their eyes looked so cruel, their gaze filled with murderous intent, as if they intended to flay the few alive. Jimmie Dale shuddered throughout his body. He couldn't understand how the town's residents, who had just a moment ago seemed so benign, could suddenly become so ferocious. However, he had also come to understand the situation at hand. The figure seated on the throne seemed to be an impostor, but somehow, he had convinced all the residents of the town, and every single one of them seemed utterly convinced, without a doubt, even as the genuine Venerable appeared, they unhesitatingly stared fixated at him. And the Venerable in front of them smiled as well. "It seems a lot has happened. I'm sure you've also entered that garden and obtained quite a bit." The figure on the throne did not respond, just staring at him. "To tell the truth, this is the second time such an event has occurred." The Venerable chuckled lightly. "Someone had once, in my absence, broken into the garden, discovered the secrets. That person was very smart and quite daring, using the identity of the Venerable, spent a whole week, from the bottom up, nearly seducing everyone. After all," he looked towards all the town's residents. "Under the influence of the totem's strength, these people really don't have much of a brain. However, I've never worried about this sort of situation arising." The Venerable's eyes turned towards the figure before him, and beside him, the protector chuckled weirdly as if looking at a fool. "Do you know why?" The figure laughed. "Tell me." "Because I only need to simply snap my fingers." The Venerable extended his hand. "And they will know who the genuine object of their worship is. True power always comes with a strong controlling nature. This group of town's great evil men, although individually not so powerful, were numerous, and had also assimilated a great deal of chaotic. Once they turned into chaotic monsters, they too posed a danger to him. So, how could there not be a contingency plan? In my view, your actions are undoubtedly laughable. The Venerable gently watched the silent figure, a smile appearing on his face. Now it should come to an end, but rest assured you're just lost and yet to return. I will treat you well. He gently snapped his fingers. Upon every town resident's body, the patterns began to rapidly change, as if they were being engulfed by a dark liquid. At this very moment, they all turned into chaotic monsters. Each one was howling. The chaotic liquid was clinging to every part of their bodies. They also had some differences. After turning into this state, their totems began to manifest, as if some power held absolute control over them. The next moment, the Venerable gently waved his hand. Every ghostly monster began to lower their heads towards the true Venerable. Not everything is written on that. And now, his voice paused slightly, as the howls of the chaotic monsters around him became even more frenzied and painful. The Venerable frowned, noticing something was amiss. Every chaotic being had a strange ghostly face clinging tightly to them, baring teeth and seemingly tearing at the chaotic liquid on their bodies. Most importantly, a massive amount of chaotic liquid actually began to abandon their original hosts, rushing towards those ghostly faces as if they had encountered some supremely delicious food. What's going on? The two protectors looked astonished at the scene. What on earth are those ghostly faces? Why are they absorbing the chaotic? The Venerable's facial expression was unreadable, but some changes were evident. According to your information, the figure also watched the scene lightly. First, the chaotic can merge with almost anything, not just living beings, but also various ghosts, soul bodies, and so on. Second, sin and retribution are key to the chaotic. They are their nourishment, and they will choose for themselves hosts who bear greater sin. So, the figure slowly brought his hands together. Venerable above. Now, isn't it much more interesting? Chapter 360. I really want to progress. The Venerable's expression wasn't exactly unpleasant. At least the usually composed smile had slightly altered. The corners of his mouth smiled coldly. He wasn't panicked by the scene before him. It was just that someone else had done what he intended to do, and his mood exuded a strong intent to kill. It should have been himself on that throne. It should have been himself collecting the chaotic liquid. But now, it had become the figure before him. Who are you? His voice held a hint of calmness. This question is profound, generally speaking. My identity is multifaceted, complex, and subject to change at any time, Su Chi said softly. But now, Su Chi, under his mask, paused. I am just a Venerable who wishes to progress. He had gathered considerable information from before, but he still hadn't discerned the true intent of the Venerable's plan. However, that wasn't important. The Venerable before him would reveal the answers. Is that so? The Venerable's gentle smile appeared very abnormal. It's good to have such intention, and to be able to instigate so many people also shows some potential. But, child, not everyone can become a Venerable. The next moment, whoosh, a sound of air vibrating came lightly from behind his head. Su Chi raised his eyebrow, and his figure moved. A black spike, assaulting from behind through the air, came rushing directly towards him, pierced straight through, and with a loud crash, a huge hole was formed. That's a bit unprincipled, friend. Su Chi stood on a tall sculpture, looking down at the area below. The Venerable was watching Su Chi. He hadn't moved, but several silent, chaotic black spikes had somehow extended from the ground beneath him. He surged to his feet, continuing to attack Su Chi fiercely. Su Chi stood on the statue, now wearing a mask. His whole being exuded a strange aura. He gently spoke. I bestow upon you resolution. and the many evildoers present underwent a change in their eyes. Initially somewhat lost and unsure whom to believe, now they all blocked the direction of the black spikes. The Venerable calmly watched this scene, now understanding why these people were deceived in such a manner. That statement just now was mixed with an inscrutable spiritual power. The person before him wasn't ordinary. He had many tactics at his disposal, yet he harbored no worries, this poor fellow, even though he knew some things and did a lot, but, sadly, it was merely a clownish performance. In that moment, all the surrounding residents roared and charged. Scram! Before the Venerable could act, two protectors already stepped forward, their indifferent eyes filled with murderous intent, directly suppressing them with spiritual power. This shook everyone's ears, and the residents were pushed back several steps. Yet they didn't stop, but struggled even more frantically, pouncing forward. Su Qi gently snapped his fingers. Bestow upon them bravery. Upon these words, their strength suddenly swelled. All spiritual energy was recklessly unleashed. Venerable! The two protectors frowned. Kill them? The Venerable calmly watched Su Qi. Curious spiritual control power? But never mind. A surge of black spikes erupted from the protectors, cutting through any evildoer that stood in their path, instantly piercing and killing them. Amounts of flesh and blood flew about, but the ghost face wasn't idle, devouring frantically without hesitation. Although it had been forced to change its master, it still loved this taste. Crunch, crunch. Truly pitiful. Their rationale occupied by ignorance and obscurantism. Only I can truly save and liberate them. The Venerable's face bore a serene smile, as if the scene of blood and flesh flying was nothing unusual. The protectors continued slaughtering. The residents who lost the symbiotic chaotic weren't much of a threat, and these evildoers, if they died, they died. It was not a big deal to just continue searching. In the present world, good people are hard to find, but how could there be a shortage of evil ones? Is this your special ability? Seems to be able to change one's state. The Venerable looked towards Su Qi. Su Qi smiled softly. Guess. This was his prestige ability, Word Spirit. Previously, his prestige ability was simulating breath, but after the incident at the Rainbow Bridge, his prestige soared like a rocket, directly ascending. Also, this unlocked a bunch of things like shrines and totems, although this instance couldn't use them right away and would consume a massive amount of spiritual energy, at least reaching 7th rank before he could utilize it. But the new title ability was ready to use. Title ability, Word Spirit. Type, Special Skill. Effect. When your faith/trust/camp degree in anyone reaches 100, speech can provide any assistive blessing. The higher the progress, the higher the spiritual power, and the greater the additional effect. Additionally, the player's words will also generate more believable emotions. Consumption, starting from 10 points of spiritual energy, fluctuating with time, the other party's faith/trust/camp degree, as well as the emotional and strength aspects of the blessing. Note: you have been empowered. Get to it. Spiritual power levels at 10th rank below 1000. 9th rank is from 1000 to 4999. 8th rank from 5000 to 20,000, and the reason 7th and 8th rank share such a wide chasm, and the disparity in strength starts from this rank, is because 7th rank directly ignores the intermediate spiritual energy values. Once ascended to 7th rank, it starts with 50,000 spiritual energy, with the highest going up to 500,000. And currently, Su Qi's strength was still at 8th rank.